welcome. Find a comfortable position, close your eyes if you wish, and let your breathing settle into a gentle rhythm. Tonight, we journey through some of the most profound mysteries, where ancient scripture and modern science meet at the very edge of understanding. Let these thoughts wash over you like waves, each one carrying you deeper into restful sleep. We begin at the absolute beginning, Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. 10 simple words in English, even fewer in the original Hebrew. Yet within this ancient sentence lies something that puzzled philosophers for millennia. The assertion of a finite start, a moment when time itself began. For thousands of years, many believed the universe was eternal, infinite in both directions, with no beginning and no end. But this single verse from Genesis declares something different. It speaks of a specific beginning, a point of origin for everything we know. And here's what makes this remarkable. It wasn't until the 20th century that science began to catch up with this idea. Before then, the prevailing scientific view held that the universe had always existed, eternal, unchanging, infinite. The very notion of a beginning seemed almost unscientific. But Genesis knew otherwise, speaking across the centuries with quiet confidence about the start of all things. Let that settle in your mind as you relax even deeper. The beginning of everything, time starting, space unfurling, matter coming into existence, all from a single point of origin. Now, consider this next mystery. Science has given us incredible tools to peer back in time, to understand the mechanics of stars and galaxies, to trace the expansion of space itself. Yet, when we ask the most fundamental question, where did it all come from, we reach a boundary that science cannot cross. The universe's origin from nothing, from absolute nothing, not empty space, because even space is something. Not quantum fluctuations, because those require quantum fields. True nothing. No matter, no energy, no space, no time, no physical laws. From this complete absence, everything appeared. Physics can tell us what happened after that first moment. It can describe the universe at a trillionth of a second old. But that first cause, that transition from nothing to something, remains beyond the reach of scientific explanation. The equations break down. The laws of physics require a universe to exist before they can operate. You cannot use the rules of a game to explain how the game itself came to be. And so, we find Genesis standing at this precipice, declaring creation ex nihilo, creation from nothing. Thousands of years before scientists would even recognize this as a profound problem. Breathe slowly. Let your body sink deeper into rest as we continue. The creation sequence described in Genesis reveals another fascinating layer. Genesis chapter 1, verses 1 through 3, presents a specific order. First, time, in the beginning. Then space, the heavens. Then matter, the earth. And then energy. Let there be light. Time, space, matter, energy. This sequence mirrors what modern cosmology tells us about the first moments after the Big Bang, the framework of the universe established in a precise order, not random, not arbitrary, but following a pattern that the ancient text somehow captured. For those writing Genesis, there is no CERN, no particle accelerators, no satellites measuring cosmic background radiation. Yet the order they recorded aligns remarkably with our modern understanding of cosmic evolution. Some might call this coincidence. Others see something more. Either way, it's a mystery that invites contemplation as you drift toward sleep. And then Genesis chapter 2 verses 1 and 2 tell us something else. Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the seventh day God finished his work. Finished. Complete. The Hebrew word carries a sense of completion, of cessation. No new matter creation after this point. The universe was furnished with all the raw material it would ever have. Everything that followed would be transformation, rearrangement, the unfolding of what already existed. This brings us to something scientists call the first law of thermodynamics. Energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. The total amount of mass and energy in the universe remains constant. It was all established at the beginning, and no new energy enters the system. This principle, discovered in the 19th century, seems to echo across time to those ancient verses. The work of creation, finished. The universe complete. Energy conserved. A closed system running on what was given at the start. Let your mind rest on this image. The universe as a vast, complete tapestry woven at the beginning with all the threads it would ever need. Now we turn to something the ancients described with poetic language that seemed purely metaphorical for most of history. The stretching out of the heavens. You find this phrase again and again in Scripture, in Isaiah, in Job, in the Psalms. He stretches out the heavens like a curtain. The ancient writers used this imagery repeatedly, as if trying to convey something they intuited, but could not fully articulate. The heavens being stretched, expanded, unfurled. For centuries, readers assumed this was simply beautiful poetry, metaphorical language for God's creative power. And it is beautiful. But it's also something more, because in 1929, an astronomer named Edwin Hubble made a discovery that would revolutionize our understanding of the cosmos. He observed that distant galaxies were moving away from us, and the farther away they were, the faster they were receding. The universe, Hubble realized, was expanding. Space itself was stretching, carrying galaxies along with it like raisins in rising bread dough. The expanding universe, one of the greatest scientific discoveries of the 20th century, confirmed through painstaking observation and mathematical precision. Yet there it was, written in ancient Hebrew thousands of years earlier, the heavens being stretched out, the fabric of space itself expanding. An image that seemed like pure poetry turned out to describe physical reality. As you breathe slowly, imagine the vast distances between galaxies growing larger with each passing moment, the universe expanding into itself, space stretching like a canvas being pulled tight. But the ancient texts don't stop with expansion. They also speak of decay, of things wearing out. The heavens themselves, the scriptures tell us, will wear out like a garment. They will perish. They will grow old like clothing. This theme appears in the Psalms, in Isaiah, in the book of Hebrews. The universe is not eternal and unchanging. It's running down, wearing out, growing old. For thousands of years, this seemed like theological poetry about the temporary nature of creation. But then came the second law of thermodynamics, entropy, the principle that in any closed system, disorder increases over time. Usable energy becomes less usable. Heat dissipates. Order breaks down. The universe is slowly winding down, like a clock that was wound up at the beginning and is gradually running out. Stars burn through their fuel and die. Galaxies will one day go dark. The universe is heading toward what physicists call heat death, a state of maximum entropy where no more work can be done, no more complexity can exist. The wearing universe, the heavens growing old. Entropy described in ancient poetry, confirmed by modern physics. The universe has not always existed, and it will not exist forever in its current form. It had a beginning, and it is moving toward an end. Between those 2 points, everything is gradually winding down, wearing out, just as the scriptures described. Let this thought carry you deeper into rest. The vast ancient cosmos, slowly and inevitably moving from order toward disorder, its energy spreading out, its stars dimming, its fires cooling. And yet, there's one more mystery in this opening segment. Something that puzzles cosmologists to this day. The universe holds together. Galaxies spin, but they spin too fast. By all calculations, they should fly apart. There isn't enough visible matter, enough gravitational pull to hold them together at the speeds they rotate. Solar systems orbit galactic centers in ways that shouldn't work based on what we can see. Something invisible is holding it all together. Scientists call this dark matter. They can see its effects but cannot detect it directly. It makes up about 85% of all matter in the universe. We know it's there because without it, nothing would make sense. Galaxies would disintegrate. Structures would never have formed. The universe would be a thin, dispersed fog of particles, never coalescing into stars, planets, or life. And in the New Testament, in Colossians chapter 1, verse 17, there's a statement about Jesus. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. All things held together, an invisible force maintaining the structure of reality itself. Dark matter remains one of the great unsolved mysteries of physics. We know the effect, but not the cause. We see the holding together, but cannot fully explain what does the holding. As your body grows heavier and your thoughts slower, rest in this final image. The universe held together by forces we cannot see, galaxies spinning in the darkness, bound by invisible threads. Everything connected, everything maintained, by a presence that permeates all of space, yet remains beyond our instrument's ability to measure. The beginning of everything, time starting, space stretching, matter completing, energy conserving, the universe expanding and wearing out, yet held together. Mysteries at the intersection of the ancient and the modern, the scriptural and the scientific, the known and the unknowable. Let these thoughts fade now like distant stars as sleep draws closer. The cosmos continues its ancient dance, and you are part of it, drifting in the quiet darkness toward rest. Continue breathing slowly and deeply. Let your mind expand outward now, beyond the beginning, into the incomprehensible vastness of all that was created. We move from origins to scale, from the moment of creation to the endless expanse that resulted. Allow yourself to feel small in the best possible way, cradled by the enormity of it all. The ancient world knew the night sky intimately. Without electric lights drowning out the stars, people saw the heavens in their full glory every clear night. The Milky Way stretched overhead like a river of light. Thousands of stars visible to the naked eye. And yet, even seeing all of this, the ancients understood something profound. They recognized that counting the stars was impossible. In Genesis, God speaks to Abraham and tells him to look up at the heavens. Count the stars if you are able to count them. The implication is clear. You cannot. In Jeremiah, the prophet writes that the host of heaven cannot be numbered, comparing the stars to the sand on the seashore. Innumerable. Beyond counting. Like trying to count every grain of sand on every beach in the world. Now, to the ancients observing with their eyes alone, this might have seemed like poetic exaggeration. They could see perhaps 2,000 to 3,000 stars on the clearest nights. Surely someone with enough patience could count them. But the scriptures insisted otherwise. Innumerable. As countless as sand grains. And the scriptures were right. When Galileo first turned his telescope to the sky in 1609, he discovered that the Milky Way wasn't a cloud or a river of light. It was made of stars, countless stars too faint and distant for the eye to see individually. As telescopes grew more powerful, the numbers grew staggering. Millions of stars. Then billions. Then we discovered that our galaxy, the Milky Way, contains somewhere between 100 billion and 400 billion stars. And it's just one galaxy among trillions. The latest estimates suggest there are more stars in the observable universe than grains of sand on all the beaches of Earth. Some calculations put the number at 10,000 stars for every grain of sand. The biblical comparison, which might have seemed like hyperbole, actually understated the reality. Innumerable stars. A prophecy of scale that humanity would only confirm thousands of years later. Rest in this vastness. Imagine trying to count grains of sand, each one representing not just one star, but 10,000. Let the impossibility of it wash over you like a gentle tide. The scriptures also speak of the heavens themselves as immeasurable. In Jeremiah, God declares that the heavens above cannot be measured, the vast universe stretching beyond human ability to quantify. For ancient peoples, this made intuitive sense. The sky went on forever. But they didn't truly grasp the scale. They couldn't have. No one could until very recently. We now know the observable universe extends about 93 billion light-years in diameter. That's the part we can see, limited by the speed of light and the age of the universe. Beyond that, space continues, possibly forever. And even within the observable universe, the distances are so vast, they break our ability to conceptualize them. When we say a star is 1,000 light-years away, we're saying its light has been traveling toward us for 1,000 years at a speed of about 186,000 miles per second. The numbers become meaningless to our earthbound brains. 1,000,000 light-years. 1,000,000,000 light-years. Immeasurable, just as the ancient text declared. We've sent our fastest spacecraft hurtling into space, and they would take tens of thousands of years to reach even the nearest stars. We've built telescopes that can peer back in time to see galaxies as they existed billions of years ago. And still, we're only scratching the surface. The heavens remain immeasurable, just as they were described when the instruments of measurement were nothing more than the human eye and mind. Let your awareness expand to fill this space. Incomprehensible distances, endless depths, the universe stretching beyond and beyond and beyond. Now consider this. Among all those innumerable stars spread across immeasurable space, no two are exactly alike. The Apostle Paul writes in 1 Corinthians that there is one glory of the sun, another glory of the moon, and another glory of the stars, for star differs from star in glory. unique stars, each one different. To the ancients, stars looked like points of light, seemingly identical except for brightness. Some were brighter, some dimmer, but they were all just stars. How could they differ beyond that? Yet Paul insisted each one had its own distinct glory, its own unique character. Modern astronomy has revealed the breathtaking truth of this statement. Stars differ in almost every imaginable way. Size. Some stars would fit inside our moon. Others are so large they would extend beyond the orbit of Jupiter if placed where our sun sits. Color. Red stars, orange stars, yellow stars, white stars, blue stars, each color indicating a different surface temperature. Age. Some stars are newly born, still wrapped in the clouds of gas that formed them. Others have been burning for billions of years, older than Earth itself. Composition. Different ratios of elements, different chemical signatures. Behavior. Some stars pulse with regular rhythms. Others flare and vary chaotically. Some travel alone. Others orbit in binary or multiple star systems, locked in gravitational dances. Every star we've examined has proven unique. Its own spectrum of light, its own history, its own future, its own glory. From the tiniest red dwarf that will burn for trillions of years to the massive blue supergiants that live fast and die young in spectacular supernova. Each star differs from every other. Paul saw points of light in the night sky and somehow knew they each possessed their own distinct nature. Science has spent 400 years confirming the details of that insight. As you sink deeper toward sleep, picture each star as an individual. Not a mass-produced copy, but a unique expression of cosmic creativity. Billions upon billions of individuals, each with its own story. The ancient texts also speak of stars in motion, stars being guided. Job chapter 38 asks, "Can you guide the bear with its children? Can you guide Orion or the Pleiades?" The implication is that these stellar patterns move, that they travel along paths, guided through the heavens. The Psalms tell us that God determines the number of the stars and calls them each by name. Stars' movements, known and named and guided. To the casual observer, stars appear fixed. The ancients called them the fixed stars to distinguish them from the wandering planets. Night after night, year after year, the constellations maintained their shapes. Orion looked like Orion. The Pleiades remained clustered together. Surely stars were stationary, permanent fixtures on the celestial sphere. But they're not fixed at all. Every star in the sky is moving, most of them at tremendous speeds. Our sun orbits the center of the Milky Way at roughly 500,000 miles per hour, carrying us along with it. Other stars have their own orbits, their own trajectories through space. Over thousands of years, the constellations slowly change shape as stars drift relative to one another. The Big Bear, Ursa Major, looked different when the pyramids were built, and it will look different thousands of years from now. Stars are guided along orbital paths, responding to the gravitational pull of the galaxy. And we've discovered that stars do seem to have names in a sense. Each star has a unique spectral signature, a specific pattern of light that identifies it as clearly as a fingerprint identifies a person. No two stars share the exact same spectrum. Each one announces its identity through its light. Each one is known. Each one traceable on its journey through space. Let this image comfort you. The stars, seemingly fixed and eternal, are actually travelers on long journeys, each one known, each one guided, each one following its appointed path through the darkness. Job also makes a curious statement about specific constellations. In chapter 38, God asks, "Can you bind the chains of the Pleiades or loose the cords of Orion?" Stars' orbits. The Pleiades bound together. Orion loosed. This seemed like nothing more than poetic imagery for thousands of years. Beautiful language about constellations, nothing more. But astronomers have discovered something remarkable. The Pleiades, that tight cluster of stars visible to the naked eye as a small group, is what's called an open cluster. These stars are gravitationally bound to one another. They were born from the same cloud of gas and dust, and they travel through space together as a group. They're young stars, only about 100 million years old, and they're bound by mutual gravity. The chains of the Pleiades are real. These stars are connected, moving together through the galaxy. Orion, on the other hand, is not bound. The stars that make up the constellation are at vastly different distances from Earth and have no gravitational connection to one another. They merely appear close together from our perspective, but they're not traveling together. Some are moving toward us, some away, some in entirely different directions. Given enough time, the constellation will dissolve, its stars scattering along independent paths. The cords of Orion are loose. The hunter will not hold his shape forever. Job somehow distinguished between stars that are bound and stars that are loosed, between gravitationally connected groups and chance alignments. This wasn't confirmed until we could measure stellar distances and proper motions with precision. Yet there it is in one of the oldest books of the Bible, a question about binding and loosing that speaks to gravitational dynamics we've only recently understood. Breathe in the mystery of this knowledge, information embedded in ancient texts, waiting for centuries to be understood. Now we come to light itself. Job chapter 38 asks another question. Where is the way to the dwelling of light? Light's path and speed. The question assumes that light travels, that it has a way, a path it takes to get from one place to another. For most of human history, people assumed light was instantaneous. You open your eyes and you see. A candle is lit and the room is immediately bright. There seemed to be no travel time, no journey for light to make. It was simply there or not there. The idea that light had a way, a path it traveled, seemed strange. But light does travel at a very specific speed, about 186,000 miles per second in a vacuum. Nothing travels faster. When you see the sun, you're actually seeing where it was 8 minutes ago, because that's how long it took the light to travel the 93 million miles from the sun to your eyes. When you look at stars, you're looking back in time. The light left those stars years, centuries, or millennia ago, and is only now completing its journey to reach you. The question in Job assumes this. Light dwells somewhere, and then travels away to reach other places. It doesn't teleport. It doesn't appear instantly. It journeys. And the scriptures asked about this journey thousands of years before we measured the speed of light, before we understood that light from distant stars took time to reach us, before we realized we were looking at the universe not as it is, but as it was. Let yourself drift on this thought. Light as a traveler, every photon that touches your eye has been on a journey, perhaps a journey of years, carrying information from distant places and distant times. Finally, we come to one of the more mysterious passages, Job chapter 38, verse 35. Can you send forth lightnings, that they may go and say to you, here we are? Lightning-like communication across space. The image of lightning being sent out and reporting back. This seemed like pure poetry, a personification of lightning for dramatic effect. But consider what we've discovered about the universe. Quasars. These are among the most energetic and luminous objects in existence, powered by supermassive black holes consuming matter at the centers of distant galaxies. They emit tremendous amounts of energy across the electromagnetic spectrum, including radio waves. These signals travel across billions of light years of space, and when they reach us, they carry information. They tell us, here we are. The language of lightning is apt. Quasars can flare with sudden increases in brightness. They pulse and vary. They send out bursts of energy that flash across the cosmos, and we receive these signals, decoding them to learn about these distant objects. The lightning goes forth, and in a sense, it reports back, announcing the existence of its source. This is the nature of light-speed communication across cosmic distances. We send signals, we receive signals, information carried on electromagnetic waves, traveling at the speed of light, spanning the vast darkness, lightning-like in its energy and speed, carrying messages across the immeasurable heavens. As your consciousness grows dimmer, settling towards sleep, rest in this final thought. The cosmos speaks. Light carries messages across billions of years and billions of light years. The stars, innumerable and unique, travel their appointed paths, some bound together, some scattered. And through it all, light makes its way, connecting distant points, making communication possible across the vastness. The universe is larger than we can imagine, but it's not silent. It's not still. It's full of motion and energy and information, all of it described in fragments and poetry by people who saw the night sky and intuited truths they couldn't possibly prove. Let the vastness hold you now. Let the incomprehensible scale comfort rather than frighten. You are small, yes, but you are part of this, connected by the same light that travels between stars, made of atoms forged in stellar furnaces, a conscious piece of the cosmos, contemplating itself. Rest now in the vastness. Sleep under the innumerable stars. Let your breathing remain slow and steady. We descend now from the vastness of space to focus on our own world, this small blue sphere spinning in the darkness. Yet even here, on familiar ground, ancient texts described realities that wouldn't be confirmed for thousands of years. Let these mysteries cradle you as sleep draws nearer. There's a passage in the book of Job, chapter 26, verse 7, that stands out with startling clarity. He hangs the earth on nothing. Earth free floats in space. 5 simple words that describe something profoundly counterintuitive to ancient understanding. The earth hangs on nothing. Suspended. Floating. Held by no pillars. Resting on no foundation. Supported by no structure. Just hanging in empty space. This was not how ancient peoples typically conceived of the world. The Egyptians imagined the earth supported by pillars or held up by gods. The Greeks, in various traditions, pictured the earth resting on the back of Atlas or floating on water. Hindu cosmology described the world supported by elephants standing on a turtle. Nearly every ancient culture developed some explanation for why the ground didn't fall, some structure or being that held the earth up, because the earth clearly needed something beneath it. Things fall down. Heavy things need support. The earth is heavy. Therefore, the earth must rest on something. But Job said otherwise. The earth hangs on nothing. No cosmic turtle. No pillars reaching into the abyss. No foundation, but empty space. This wasn't intuitive. It wasn't obvious from observation. If you're standing on solid ground, the idea that there's nothing underneath seems absurd. Yet this is exactly what we've discovered. The Earth floats freely in space, held in orbit by gravity, but not resting on anything, not supported by any physical structure. It hangs on nothing, just as Job described 3,500 years ago, or more. When astronauts first photographed Earth from space, showing it as a sphere floating in the darkness, they confirmed what this ancient text had declared. Our world hangs on nothing, suspended in the void, orbiting the sun not because something holds it on a track, but because of the elegant mathematics of gravity and motion. Free-floating through space at tremendous speed, yet stable, held by invisible forces rather than visible supports. Let this image fill your mind. The ground beneath you is part of a sphere floating in emptiness. No strings, no supports, just the earth, hanging on nothing, spinning through the darkness. Let this thought paradoxically ground you as you drift toward sleep. The shape of this floating earth is also subtly addressed in Scripture. In Isaiah chapter 40, verse 22, God sits above the circle of the earth. In Proverbs chapter 8, verse 27, wisdom describes God inscribing a circle on the face of the deep. The Hebrew word used, chug, can mean circle, circuit, or sphere. It implies roundness. A spherical earth. To the ancients, this wasn't obvious. The earth looks flat when you're standing on it. The horizon appears as a straight line. The ground stretches away in all directions, seemingly without curve. Many ancient cosmologies described a flat earth, a disk, or a rectangle, because that matched immediate perception. But the biblical writers used this imagery of circles and spheres when describing the earth. Some argue these passages only indicate a circular disk, not a sphere. But consider the context. The earth is described as hanging on nothing, floating in space. A disk would have an edge, a boundary. The consistency of these descriptions suggests something more complete. A sphere has no edge. It looks like a circle from any angle. It can hang freely in space in a way a disk cannot. Ancient scholars, including early Christian theologians, recognized that these passages pointed to a spherical earth long before this became common knowledge. The shape wasn't definitively proven until circumnavigation, and eventually until we could photograph the earth from space. But the suggestion was there in the text, the circle of the earth, the sphere hanging on nothing, an image that would be confirmed millennia later. As your body grows heavier, imagine the curve of the earth, the way the horizon drops away, the gentle arc of our world as seen from high altitude, the perfect sphere as seen from space, blue and white against the black, the circle of the earth. Now we come to a curious passage in Job chapter 38, verse 14. The earth is changed like clay under a seal. The image is of clay being pressed by a seal, turning as the seal rotates or rolls across it. Earth's rotation, the turning of the world. This metaphor puzzled readers for centuries. How is the earth like clay under a seal? The earth rotates. It spins on its axis once every 24 hours, creating the cycle of day and night. But you can't feel this rotation. The ground seems stable and still. To ancient observers, the earth was obviously stationary, and the sun, moon, and stars moved around it. The heavens rotated. The earth stood still. This seemed like simple observation. Yet Job uses this imagery of the earth being changed, being turned, like clay under a seal. A seal rolling across clay creates patterns, impressions that change as the seal rotates. The earth, in this image, is the thing that turns, not the background. It's an active participant in the motion. We now know the earth does indeed rotate. As it turns, different portions face the sun, creating day and night. From our perspective on the surface, it appears as if the sun rises and sets, moving across the sky. But really, we're turning. The earth is spinning, and we're being carried along with it at about 1,000 miles per hour at the equator. The imagery of clay under a seal captures something of this. The surface is not static. It's in motion. It's turning. It's being changed by the rotation, with different phases presented to the heavens as it spins. This wasn't proven until detailed astronomical observations could show that the Earth's rotation better explained celestial motions than geocentric models. But the image was there. The Earth changed like clay under a seal, turning, rotating, not as stationary as it appeared. Let yourself feel that rotation now. You're spinning through space, carried on the surface of a sphere that completes a full rotation every 24 hours, moving at tremendous speed, yet feeling perfectly still. The world turning beneath you as you rest. The earth is also described as having stability despite this motion. Psalm 75 verse 3 speaks of the earth and its inhabitants tottering, but God making firm its pillars. Job chapter 9 describes pillars that tremble. These pillars aren't literal stone columns holding up a flat earth. Instead, they appear to reference something deeper. The magnetic field, the invisible structure that gives Earth its stability. Earth's magnetic field is generated by the motion of molten iron in the outer core. This field extends far into space, creating a protective bubble around our planet. It shields us from solar wind and cosmic radiation. Without it, the Earth's atmosphere might have been stripped away long ago, leaving us as barren as Mars. The magnetic field is, in a very real sense, part of the invisible infrastructure that keeps the Earth stable and inhabitable. This field isn't constant. It fluctuates. It trembles. The magnetic poles wander. Sometimes the entire field reverses, with north and south flipping. These magnetic reversals have happened repeatedly throughout Earth's history. The pillars tremble. The invisible support structure of our world is dynamic, shifting, responding to deep processes within the Earth. The ancients couldn't detect magnetic fields. They had no instruments to measure this invisible force. Yet the imagery of pillars, invisible supports that tremble and shake, but maintain the Earth's stability, captures something true about the hidden structures that make our world viable. The Earth hangs on nothing visible, but it's held together by forces that, while invisible, are very real. Rest in this protection. Invisible fields surrounding you, shielding you, maintaining the stability of your world even as they shift and tremble with internal dynamics. The scriptures also speak of Earth's deep places. Job chapter 38 describes the foundations of the earth. Psalm 104 speaks of valleys sinking down. Proverbs chapter 8 mentions the deep and the fountains of the deep, deep valleys and foundations, tectonic descriptions. The earth described not as a simple uniform sphere, but as something with deep structure. Foundations, valleys, abysses. We now understand that Earth's surface is divided into tectonic plates, massive sections of crust that float on the semi-molten mantle below. These plates move, colliding and separating in a process called plate tectonics. Where plates collide, mountains rise. Where they separate, valleys form, and oceans flood in. The ocean floor contains the deepest valleys on Earth, trenches where one plate slides beneath another, descending into the depths. The foundations of the Earth aren't static. They're dynamic. The continents drift, mountains rise and erode, ocean basins open and close. The very structure of the planet is in slow but constant motion, foundations shifting on timescales of millions of years. The biblical descriptions of foundations, depths, and valleys that sink down point toward this deeper structure. The earth isn't a simple solid ball. It has layers, foundations, deep places where processes beyond human observation shape and reshape the surface. When the Bible describes valleys sinking down and foundations, it's gesturing towards something we've only recently mapped in detail. The abyssal plains of the ocean floor, the deep trenches, the roots of mountains extending miles down into the crust, the complex layered structure of our planet. Let your awareness sink down into these depths. Below the surface, beyond sight, the foundations of the world slowly shift and adjust, maintaining the dynamic equilibrium that allows life to flourish above. And finally, we come to volcanic activity. Psalm 104 verse 32 describes God touching the mountains, and they smoke. Psalm 18 speaks of the earth reeling and rocking, mountains trembling, smoke going up. Nahum chapter 1 describes mountains quaking before God. Mountains quaking and smoking, fire and trembling, the earth's surface not as stable as it appears. Volcanic activity is a direct result of the earth's internal heat and tectonic processes. Magma rises from the mantle through cracks in the crust. Mountains literally smoke and quake. They erupt with fire and ash. The ground trembles for miles around. Lava flows down slopes. Volcanic mountains are built layer by layer from these eruptions, growing over thousands or millions of years, then sometimes destroying themselves in catastrophic explosions. The biblical writers lived in a region with significant geological activity. They would have known about earthquakes and possibly witnessed or heard accounts of volcanic eruptions. But the way they describe these phenomena suggests an understanding that mountains aren't permanent and stable. They quake, they smoke, they respond to forces deep within the earth. The very foundations tremble. We now understand that volcanic activity is essential to Earth's habitability. Volcanoes release gases that replenish the atmosphere. They bring nutrients from deep within the earth to the surface, enriching soils. They're part of the carbon cycle that regulates Earth's temperature over geological time. Mountains that smoke and quake aren't just destructive forces. They're part of the planetary system that makes life possible. The Earth hangs on nothing, yet it's anything but still. It rotates. Its magnetic field trembles. Its foundations shift. Its mountains smoke and quake. All of this described in fragments throughout ancient texts, pieces of a picture that would only become clear when we could study the Earth as a complete system. As you settle deeper into sleep, feel the solid Earth beneath you. Know that it's floating in space, suspended on nothing. Know that it's turning, carrying you through the darkness at tremendous speed. Know that invisible fields protect you. Know that deep beneath, foundations shift slowly, mountains rise and fall. The planet breathes with geological time. You're resting on a dynamic, living world, stable enough to support you, active enough to remain alive. The Earth hangs on nothing, and on this floating, turning, quaking, smoking sphere, you rest, safe, held, drifting now towards sleep under the protection of forces seen and unseen. Let it all fade. The sphere, the rotation, the depths, the fields, all fading into the gentle darkness of sleep. Continue to breathe slowly, deeply, letting each breath carry you further into relaxation. We turn now to the elements that surround us: water and air, the fluid systems that make our world habitable. Ancient observers watched rain fall and wind blow, yet somehow perceived patterns and processes that wouldn't be scientifically documented for millennia. Let these flowing thoughts carry you gently toward sleep. Water moves in a cycle. This seems obvious to us now, taught in elementary school. Water evaporates from oceans and lakes, rises into the atmosphere, forms clouds, falls as rain, flows back to the sea, and the cycle begins again. The hydrological cycle, a closed system of continuous circulation. But this wasn't always understood as clearly as it is today. Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verses 6 and 7 describe this process with remarkable clarity. The wind goes toward the south and turns around to the north. The wind whirls about continually and comes again on its circuit. All the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. To the place from which the rivers come, there they return again. The cycle described: water flowing to the sea, yet the sea not overflowing. The water returning to where the rivers come from. Job chapter 36 elaborates further. For he draws up the drops of water, they distill his mist in rain, which the skies pour down and drop on mankind abundantly. Evaporation and rain cycle. Water drawn up, turned to mist, falling as rain. The process laid out in sequence. Amos chapter 5, verse 8 speaks of God calling for the waters of the sea and pouring them out on the face of the earth. Again, this imagery of water being lifted from the sea and poured out as rain. For ancient peoples who didn't have our understanding of evaporation and condensation, who didn't know about water vapor and atmospheric processes, these descriptions are remarkably accurate. Water is drawn up from the seas. It forms clouds. It falls as rain. It flows back to the sea. The cycle continues endlessly. Aristotle wouldn't describe the water cycle in detail until the 4th century BC. The scientific understanding of evaporation, condensation, and precipitation wouldn't be firmly established until much later. Yet here in texts written centuries before Aristotle, we find the hydrological cycle described with stunning accuracy. Water doesn't simply disappear and reappear. It moves in a circuit. It's drawn up and poured down. The rivers flow to the sea, but the water returns to where the rivers come from, sustaining the endless flow. Let this image fill your mind. Water endlessly circulating, rising from the oceans as invisible vapor, condensing into clouds, falling as rain on mountains, flowing in streams and rivers back to the sea, an endless cycle, driven by the sun's energy, distributing fresh water across the continents, making life possible far from the oceans. The ancient texts also speak of patterns in the sea itself. Psalm 8, verse 8, mentions the paths of the seas. Ocean currents. The phrase puzzled readers for centuries. What could paths in the sea mean? Water is water. The ocean is a uniform mass of liquid. How could it have paths? But the ocean does have paths. Currents, rivers within the sea. The Gulf Stream, the Kuroshio Current, the Antarctic Circumpolar Current. These massive flows of water move through the oceans in consistent patterns, driven by wind, the Earth's rotation, and differences in water temperature and salinity. They're like highways in the sea, paths that ships can follow to move faster or must cross against to make progress. Matthew Fontaine Maury, a 19th century naval officer and oceanographer, reportedly was inspired by this verse from Psalms to study ocean currents systematically. He mapped these paths of the seas, creating charts that revolutionized navigation. Sailors could now use these currents intentionally, following the paths where they helped and avoiding them where they hindered. What seemed like poetic language, paths of the seas, turned out to describe physical reality. The ocean isn't uniform. It has structure. It has paths. These currents are essential to Earth's climate. They transport heat from the equator toward the poles. They bring nutrients from the deep to surface waters, supporting marine ecosystems. Without these paths of the seas, Earth's climate would be far less stable and the oceans far less productive. The circulation of water through the ocean basins is as important as the circulation of water through the atmosphere. Imagine yourself floating on these currents, great rivers of water flowing through the sea, paths invisible from the surface but as real as any highway, water moving in purposeful patterns, connecting distant parts of the ocean, regulating temperature, distributing life. These paths extend beyond simple surface currents. The sea's hidden paths include gyres, massive circular current systems that dominate entire ocean basins, storm systems that follow predictable tracks across the seas. Thermohaline circulation, the deep ocean conveyor belt that moves water through all the world's oceans over thousands of years. The sea has layers of circulation, paths within paths, patterns operating at different depths and timescales. Job Chapter 38 asks, "Have you entered into the springs of the sea, or walked in the recesses of the deep?" For most of history, the deep ocean was completely inaccessible, unknown. We could see the surface, but what lay beneath, especially in the deepest parts, remained mysterious. The springs of the sea, the recesses of the deep. What could these phrases mean? We now know the ocean floor is far from flat and featureless. Ocean floor springs and mountains, deep-sea vents and ridges. The mid-ocean ridge system is the longest mountain range on Earth, stretching some 40,000 miles along the ocean floors. These underwater mountains mark where tectonic plates are spreading apart, where new ocean floor is being created from magma rising from below. And at certain points along these ridges and elsewhere on the ocean floor, there are indeed springs, hydrothermal vents, the fountains of the deep, superheated water, sometimes reaching temperatures above 700 degrees Fahrenheit, gushes out of the sea floor. These underwater geysers are heated by volcanic activity beneath the crust. They spew out minerals and chemicals, creating bizarre chimney-like structures. Around them, entire ecosystems thrive in the total darkness of the deep ocean, sustained not by sunlight, but by the chemicals from these vents. Genesis chapter 7, verse 11, describing the flood, mentions all the fountains of the great deep burst forth. Fountains of the deep. Water coming up from below, not just falling from above. For centuries, this seemed purely mythological. How could water fountain up from the ocean? Water was already there. But now we know that vast amounts of water are locked in the rocks beneath the ocean floor. Hydrothermal vents are indeed fountains, water superheated and expelled from deep within the earth. These discoveries are recent. The mid-ocean ridges weren't mapped until the 1950s. Hydrothermal vents weren't discovered until 1977. Yet the biblical texts spoke of springs in the sea, fountains of the deep, recesses and hidden places beneath the waters. What seemed like imaginative language described real features we would only discover when we finally developed the technology to explore the ocean depths. Let your mind descend into those depths now. Total darkness, crushing pressure, and yet mountains rising from the seafloor, hot water fountaining up, strange life thriving in conditions that seem impossible. The springs of the sea, the fountains of the deep, real places, finally discovered after thousands of years. Now we rise back through the water, through the surface, into the air. Genesis chapter 1 speaks of the firmament, a space between waters above and waters below. Water above the atmosphere. For centuries, interpreters struggled with this. How could there be water above the sky? It seemed like a primitive cosmology, imagining literal oceans in the heavens. But consider the atmosphere from a modern perspective. The troposphere, the lowest layer of our atmosphere where we live and where weather occurs, contains vast amounts of water. Water vapor, moisture suspended in the air. Clouds are water, either as tiny liquid droplets or ice crystals. The atmosphere holds this water above the surface, above the land and the seas below. It's literally water above, separated from the water below by the expanse of the atmosphere. At any given moment, the atmosphere contains about 12,900 cubic kilometers of water. That's a staggering amount, suspended above our heads, cycling through evaporation and precipitation. The firmament, the atmospheric expanse, does indeed separate waters. Water vapor above, oceans and lakes below, with the breathable atmosphere as the space between. What seemed like a naive cosmological model actually describes the distribution of Earth's water reasonably well, though in terms an ancient audience could grasp. The air itself is described as having motion and pattern. Ecclesiastes speaks of wind going toward the south and turning around to the north, whirling about continually. Jet streams, high-altitude winds that circle the earth in meandering rivers of air. These weren't discovered until aircraft began flying at high altitudes in the early 20th century. Pilots found zones where winds were incredibly strong and consistent, flowing from west to east in the middle latitudes. Jet streams are caused by the interaction of cold polar air and warm tropical air combined with the Earth's rotation. They flow at altitudes of about 30,000 to 40,000 feet, reaching speeds of over 200 miles per hour. They guide weather systems, pushing storms along predictable paths. Aircraft use them to speed their journeys or avoid them to save fuel. These winds circle the earth continually, just as Ecclesiastes described. The wind whirls about on its circuit, turning and returning. The ancient observer could feel wind and watch clouds move, but couldn't perceive these high-altitude patterns. Yet the description captures the reality. Wind doesn't blow randomly. It follows patterns. It circulates. It returns on its circuit. The atmosphere has structure, pathways for air, just as the ocean has pathways for water. Rest in the movement of air, wind flowing around the globe, carrying weather, distributing heat and moisture, the atmosphere in constant circulation, yet stable enough to sustain life. The breath you take is part of this vast circulation, air that has traveled around the world countless times. The Bible also makes a curious statement about air itself in Job, chapter 28, verse 25. God imparted weight to the wind. Air has weight. For most of human history, this seemed wrong. Air feels weightless. It surrounds us, but doesn't press down like water. A bag full of air weighs the same as an empty bag on a simple scale. Surely air has no weight. But air does have weight, substantial weight. The entire atmosphere pressing down on every surface at sea level exerts about 14.7 pounds per square inch. That's nearly 15 pounds of pressure on every square inch of your body, thousands of pounds of total force. You don't feel this because the pressure is equal in all directions, and your body is designed to exist in this pressure. But it's there. Air has weight. The wind can be measured, can be weighed, just as Job declared. This wasn't proven scientifically until Evangelista Torricelli invented the barometer in 1643. He showed that air pressure varies and that this variation affects weather, high pressure and low pressure systems, barometric pressure, the weight of the air changing from place to place and time to time. When a low pressure system moves in, the air weighs less, pressure drops, and storms often follow. When high pressure dominates, the air weighs more, pressure rises, and clear weather typically prevails. Weather forecasting depends on measuring these changes in air pressure, the weight of the wind. What seemed like an odd phrase in Job turned out to describe something fundamental to meteorology. Air isn't weightless. It presses down on us constantly. Its weight can be measured, and those measurements tell us what the weather will do. As you breathe, feel the air entering your lungs. That air has weight. The atmosphere surrounds you, pressing gently but firmly from all directions. Tons of air above you, held by gravity, creating the pressure that allows your body to function, that allows liquid water to exist on Earth's surface, that makes weather and life possible. Water cycling from sea to sky to land and back again. Currents flowing through the oceans in consistent paths, springs and mountains on the seafloor, fountains of the deep releasing superheated water. Water vapor suspended above in the atmospheric expanse, winds circling the globe in high-altitude streams, air with measurable weight, its pressure rising and falling, driven weather systems across the continents. All of this described in fragments and poetry by ancient observers who had no instruments, no satellites, no submarines, no aircraft. They watched rain fall and wind blow. They sailed the seas and saw storms approach. And somehow they perceived patterns, cycles, paths, weight, structure in systems that seemed chaotic. Let these fluid systems carry you now towards sleep. Water and air in constant motion around you, above you, beneath you. The great cycles and currents that make this planet alive, that create weather and distribute life-giving moisture. You're suspended in these systems, breathing air that has circulated around the world, drinking water that has fallen as rain in distant mountains, surrounded by invisible currents and pressures that maintain the delicate balance of habitability. Rest in the flow. Let the water cycle carry your thoughts away like a river returning to the sea. Let the wind disperse your worries like clouds across the sky. The systems continue their ancient patterns, and you rest safely within them, held by air that has weight, surrounded by water that moves in endless circulation. Sleep now, cradled by the weight of the atmosphere, the flow of hidden currents, the gentle fall of water cycling from sea to sky and back again. Let your breathing become even slower now, more shallow, as your body prepares for deeper rest. We turn inward now, from the cosmic and planetary to the personal and biological, to life itself, to the mystery of living things, of bodies, of the intricate machinery that allows consciousness to exist. These truths touch you directly, for they describe what you are. Let them wash over you gently as sleep approaches. There's a principle so fundamental to biology that we rarely question it. Life comes from life. Living things arise only from other living things. A bird hatches from an egg laid by another bird. A tree grows from a seed produced by another tree. Bacteria divide to create more bacteria. This is called the law of biogenesis, life from life. It seems obvious now, but for most of history, people believed otherwise. Spontaneous generation was the dominant theory for thousands of years. People observed maggots appearing on rotting meat and assumed the meat produced the maggots. They saw mice appearing in stored grain and concluded the grain transformed into mice. Life seemed to arise spontaneously from non-living matter all the time. The ancient Greek philosophers taught this. Medieval scholars accepted it. Even into the 19th century, scientists debated whether microorganisms could arise spontaneously from broth or pond water. But Genesis chapter 1 presents a different picture. God creates living things, and then those living things reproduce according to their kind. Life comes from prior life. Birds produce birds. Plants produce plants, each kind reproducing after its own kind. The text doesn't suggest life arising spontaneously from non-living matter except at the original creation events. After that, life comes from life. It wasn't until Louis Pasteur's experiments in 1861 that spontaneous generation was definitively disproven. Life comes only from life. Biogenesis, not abiogenesis, except at the very beginning. The biblical text assumed this principle from the start. Each kind reproducing after its kind. Life perpetuating life. A cycle as fundamental as the water cycle, but far more mysterious. As you rest, consider the chain of life that leads to you. An unbroken line of living ancestors stretching back thousands of generations. Hundreds of thousands. Millions. Each generation producing the next. Life from life, from life. An unbroken thread connecting you to the very beginning. Now we go deeper, smaller, to the building blocks of matter itself. Hebrews chapter 11 verse 3 states, "By faith we understand that the universe was created by the word of God, so that what is seen was not made out of things that are visible. Invisible particles form matter, the visible made from the invisible, unseen building blocks. To the naked eye, matter appears solid and continuous. A stone is just a stone. Water is just water. There's no hint of anything smaller, any hidden structure. For most of history, matter was assumed to be either infinitely divisible or composed of 4 or 5 basic elements: earth, water, air, fire, and possibly ether. The idea that visible objects were made of invisible particles was purely philosophical speculation. But Hebrews declares that the visible is made from the invisible. What we see is constructed from what we cannot see. This turns out to be profoundly true. Matter is made of atoms. Atoms are made of protons, neutrons, and electrons. Those particles are made of quarks and leptons. At every level, as we zoom in, we find that the apparently solid visible world is actually made of increasingly tiny invisible particles, most of which are mostly empty space. The solidity you feel is an illusion created by electromagnetic forces between atoms. You're not touching anything in the classical sense. You're experiencing the repulsion between electron clouds, the visible made from the invisible. A chair is made of atoms you cannot see. Your body is made of cells you cannot see without a microscope, made of molecules you cannot see without much more powerful instruments, made of atoms you cannot see even with the most powerful microscopes, made of subatomic particles that exist more as probability clouds than as solid objects. The deeper we look, the more invisible everything becomes. Yet this invisible foundation creates the solid, visible world you experience. The ancient Greek philosopher Democritus proposed atoms, uncuttable particles, as a philosophical idea. But atoms' indivisibility, or at least the concept of smallest matter hinted at in Scripture, predates systematic atomic theory. The word atom comes from Greek atomos, meaning uncuttable, something that cannot be divided further, the smallest unit of matter. We now know atoms can be divided, split into protons, neutrons, and electrons, and those can be further divided into quarks. But there does seem to be a level of fundamental particles that cannot be subdivided further. Quarks, electrons, photons, neutrinos. The standard model of particle physics describes these fundamental building blocks. Everything else is made by combining these elementary particles in various ways. The intuition that matter has the smallest level, that you can't divide forever, that there are fundamental building blocks from which everything else is constructed. This intuition appears in various ancient texts and philosophies. The biblical text gestures toward it with the language of the visible made from the invisible. There are layers beneath what we see, structures within structures, until finally, at the smallest scale, we reach something fundamental. Let your mind rest on this strange truth. You feel solid, but you're mostly empty space. The atoms that make up your body are separated by vast distances at the atomic scale. You're a pattern of particles, held together by invisible forces, creating the experience of solidity and continuity. The invisible made visible, the intangible foundation of the tangible. David, writing in Psalm 139, marvels at his own creation. For you formed my inward parts, you knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works. My soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you, when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. Cell complexity, intricate formation in the womb. David uses the language of weaving, of knitting, of intricate work done in secret. This isn't the language of simple formation, of mere shaping like a potter with clay. This is the language of complexity, of many parts working together in precise coordination. A single human cell is more complex than any machine we've ever built. The cell membrane, with its carefully regulated channels and pumps. The mitochondria generating energy. The endoplasmic reticulum and Golgi apparatus manufacturing and processing proteins. The nucleus containing DNA, ribosomes. Reading genetic instructions and assembling proteins. Countless molecular machines working in coordination, each one precisely constructed. And a human being starts as a single cell that must divide and differentiate into trillions of cells of hundreds of different types. Nerve cells, muscle cells, bone cells, skin cells, each type with its own specialized structure and function, all coordinated by genetic instructions and chemical signals, all developing from that single fertilized egg in a process that remains, despite all we've learned, profoundly mysterious in its precision and reliability, intricately woven, fearfully and wonderfully made. David knew he was complex. He sensed the intricacy even without microscopes or genetics. The sense that a human body is not simple, not crude, but elaborately constructed with wisdom beyond human comprehension. As your body rests, consider its complexity. Your heart beating without conscious thought, regulated by electrical signals. Your lungs expanding and contracting, exchanging gases across thin membranes. Your digestive system breaking down food into usable molecules. Your immune system constantly patrolling for threats. Your nervous system processing sensory information and maintaining balance and posture even as you sleep. Trillions of cells working in harmony, intricately woven, fearfully and wonderfully made. David continues in Psalm 139, verse 16. Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there was none of them. Another translation renders it, your eyes saw my unformed body. All the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. Life's blueprint, members written before formation. DNA, the instruction manual for building and maintaining a human body. Every physical characteristic encoded in a chemical language written in sequences of 4 molecular letters: adenine, thymine, guanine, cytosine, RNA, A, T, G, C, arranged in specific orders along the twisted ladder of the DNA double helix. Your DNA contains about 3 billion base pairs. If you printed it out as text, it would fill thousands of books. This blueprint was present in that first fertilized egg. It guided every stage of your development. It determines whether you'll have brown eyes or blue, curly hair or straight, tall stature or short. It influences your susceptibility to certain diseases and your physical capabilities. Written before you were formed, a book of instructions that has guided your construction from a single cell into the complex being you are now. We didn't discover DNA's structure until 1953, when Watson and Crick deciphered the double helix. The genetic code wasn't cracked until the 1960s. Yet David wrote of members being written in a book before they were formed, information preceding structure, blueprint preceding construction. The metaphor captures something profound about biology. You are, in a sense, an expression of information, the physical manifestation of instructions written in molecular language. Job chapter 10, verses 10 and 11 describe embryonic development in poetic terms. Did you not pour me out like milk and curdle me like cheese? You clothed me with skin and flesh, and knit me together with bare bones and sinews. Human embryo stages. Development described poetically. The progression from liquid to increasingly solid forms. The formation of layers and structures. Modern embryology describes development in stages. The single cell dividing into many. The formation of a hollow ball of cells. Gastrulation, where the embryo develops 3 primary layers that will become different tissue types. The formation of the neural tube that becomes the brain and spinal cord. The appearance of limb buds that will become arms and legs. The development of organs, each appearing in a precise sequence. Job's description captures something of this progression. Poured out like milk, the initial fluid, simple state. Curdled like cheese, the beginning of structure, of differentiation. Clothed with skin and flesh, the development of tissues. Knit together with bones and sinews, the formation of the skeletal and muscular systems that give structure and strength. These aren't scientifically precise descriptions. They're poetry. But they're poetry that understands development as a process, a progression through stages from simple to complex. Not instant creation of a miniature adult, which was a common belief for many centuries. People once thought embryos contained fully formed tiny humans that simply grew larger. But these biblical descriptions suggest something more accurate. A process of formation, stages of development, simple becoming complex through an intricate unfolding. Let this image comfort you. You were formed gradually, carefully, through a process that has been refined over millions of years of evolution and that reflects deep wisdom in its precision. From a single cell to a complete human being, every stage purposeful, every step coordinated. Leviticus chapter 17 verse 11 declares, "For the life of the flesh is in the blood. Blood as source of life. Life is in the blood." This seemed like obvious observation to ancient peoples. When blood leaves the body, life leaves with it. Blood is warm, flows, moves. It seems alive in a way other body parts don't. But the deeper truth took longer to understand. Blood carries oxygen from the lungs to every cell in your body. Without oxygen, cells die within minutes. Blood also carries nutrients, hormones, immune cells, clotting factors, waste products to be filtered out. It regulates body temperature. It maintains pH balance. It's literally the life support system flowing through 60,000 miles of blood vessels in your body. The biblical prohibition against consuming blood was based on this principle. Life is in the blood. Blood is sacred. It belongs to God. This prohibition predates any understanding of blood-borne diseases, yet following it would have provided protection against many illnesses transmitted through blood. But more fundamentally, it recognized something true. Blood is not just tissue. It's the carrier of life itself, the medium through which life is sustained in every organ, every tissue, every cell. Your blood is circulating right now, even as you rest. Your heart pumps it steadily, about 5 liters every minute, never stopping from before birth until death. This red river of life, flowing continuously, maintaining your existence moment by moment. Life is in the blood. Finally, an oddly specific instruction in Genesis chapter 17, verse 12. Male infants are to be circumcised on the 8th day. Circumcision on the 8th day. Why the 8th day specifically? For thousands of years, this seemed like an arbitrary choice, just a religious requirement with no particular significance beyond obedience. But medical research has discovered something remarkable about newborn blood chemistry. Vitamin K, which is necessary for blood clotting, is normally produced by bacteria in the intestines. Newborns have sterile intestines at birth. It takes about a week for their intestines to be colonized by the bacteria that produce vitamin K. By the 8th day, vitamin K levels have risen to normal or even above normal. Additionally, prothrombin, another key clotting factor, reaches its highest level in a newborn's life on the 8th day, peaking at about 110% of normal adult levels. The 8th day represents the optimal clotting timing. It's the day when the newborn's blood is best prepared to handle the minor surgery of circumcision with minimal bleeding risk. This wasn't understood until the 20th century, yet the instruction was given thousands of years earlier. The 8th day, not the 1st, not the 5th, not the 10th. The 8th day, when blood clotting is at its peak in a newborn's life. Optimal timing encoded in ancient religious law, its medical wisdom hidden until we could study blood chemistry in detail. Life comes from life, perpetuating in an unbroken chain. Visible matter built from invisible particles, atoms giving rise to molecules, giving rise to cells, giving rise to organisms. Complex biological structures intricately woven in the womb, following instructions written before formation, developing through precise stages from simple to complex. Blood carrying life through the body, sustaining every cell. And even in ancient medical practices, wisdom about the optimal timing for procedures based on blood chemistry. The mystery of life, from the cellular to the cosmic, from the molecular machinery to the intricate development of a human being. Fearfully and wonderfully made, life from life. The invisible made visible. Instructions written before you were formed, now expressed in the living, breathing, thinking being that is you. Let these truths about your own existence comfort you as you drift deeper. You are complex beyond imagining, intricately woven. A pattern of invisible particles creating visible life. Blood flowing, cells working, DNA instructions being read and executed, all happening automatically, without your conscious effort, maintaining your life as you sleep. Rest now in the wonder of your own existence, the biological miracle that is you, the intricate systems working in harmony, the legacy of billions of years of life coming from life, culminating in this moment, in this body, in this consciousness, settling peacefully towards sleep. Let it all fade. The cells, the atoms, the blood, the instructions, all fading into the gentle darkness as your wonderfully made body carries you into rest. Your breathing is slow and rhythmic now, your body heavy and still. We turn our attention to the living world around us, to the creatures that share this planet, and to humanity's place among them, to the deep history written in bones and artifacts, in instincts and behaviors that puzzle and amaze us. Let these thoughts drift through your mind like clouds across a darkening sky. Job chapter 12 verses 7 and 8 offers remarkable advice. But ask the beasts, and they will teach you, the birds of the heavens, and they will tell you, or the bushes of the earth, and they will teach you, and the fish of the sea will declare to you. Animal instincts, innate wisdom in creatures, the suggestion that animals possess knowledge, that they can teach us, that there is wisdom built into their very nature. Animals know things without being taught. A spider spins an intricate web the first time it tries, following no instruction manual. Salmon return to the exact stream where they were born after years in the ocean, navigating thousands of miles. Birds migrate along routes they've never traveled before, finding their way with precision. Bees perform elaborate dances to communicate the location of flowers to their hive mates. Dogs can sense earthquakes before they happen. Elephants mourn their dead and show what appears to be grief and memory. This innate wisdom, these instincts, are encoded somehow in the animal's being. Programmed, we might say, though the mechanism is far more subtle than any computer program. Genetic instructions combined with brain structures create behaviors so complex that they often exceed what humans can do with all our conscious intelligence. A bird building a nest knows what it's doing without ever being taught. The knowledge is simply there, built in, part of what it means to be that kind of creature. Modern science studies these instincts, mapping the neural circuits and genetic factors involved, but the deeper mystery remains. How does pure chemistry and electricity create the appearance of wisdom? How does DNA encode not just physical structure, but behavior, knowledge, instinctive understanding? The animals teach us, if we're humble enough to observe and learn, that intelligence and wisdom take forms beyond conscious reasoning. As you rest, think of the animals you've known or observed. The way a cat always lands on its feet. The way birds know when to fly south. The way ants build complex underground cities with ventilation and food storage. Innate wisdom, built-in knowledge. The book of Job was right to suggest that these creatures have something to teach us about the mysteries of creation. The book of Job also contains some of the most debated passages in Scripture. Job chapter 40 describes a creature called Behemoth. Behold Behemoth, which I made as I made you. He eats grass like an ox. Behold, his strength in his loins, and his power in the muscles of his belly. He makes his tail stiff like a cedar. The sinews of his thighs are knit together. His bones are tubes of bronze, his limbs like bars of iron. Dinosaurs described. Behemoth imagery. A creature with strength in its loins and belly, a tail like a cedar tree, bones like bronze tubes, limbs like iron bars. For centuries, interpreters tried to fit this description to known animals. Perhaps a hippopotamus. But hippos have small tails, nothing like a cedar. An elephant? But elephants' tails are also relatively small, and the description doesn't quite fit. The description fits far better with large sauropod dinosaurs. Creatures like Brachiosaurus or Argentinosaurus, massive herbivores that ate vegetation. Tails that were indeed enormous, thick and powerful. Bones that needed to be incredibly strong to support bodies weighing dozens of tons. The comparison to bronze and iron makes sense for bones that had to bear such weight. But dinosaurs went extinct millions of years before humans evolved, according to standard scientific chronology. How could Job describe one? Some suggest the text is describing dinosaurs from oral traditions or from fossil remains that ancient peoples discovered and tried to interpret. Others suggest the chronology might be more complex than we think, or that the description is of a creature that has since gone extinct, but that lived within human memory. The passage remains mysterious. The description doesn't fit any living animal well, but it fits remarkably with what we know of certain dinosaurs. Whether this represents actual observation, cultural memory, fossil interpretation, or poetic imagination about creatures that once existed, the imagery is striking. A creature of immense size and strength, bones like metal, a tail like a tree, behemoth. Let your mind wander to these ancient creatures, the massive dinosaurs that once walked the earth, footprints preserved in stone, bones that tell stories of creatures stranger than most imagination could conjure. Whether Job saw them or heard of them or imagined them from evidence, the description captures something of their power and majesty. Now we turn to humanity itself and to evidence that challenges simple narratives of progress. For much of modern history, we assumed human civilization began primitively and progressed linearly. Primitive, not ancestors. The idea that ancient peoples were simple, crude, barely capable. That they slowly evolved culturally from Stone Age simplicity to modern sophistication. But archaeology has repeatedly complicated this story. Advanced early societies, ancient peoples who were far more capable than we gave them credit for. The Göbekli Tepe temple complex in Turkey dates to about 11,000 years ago, constructed by hunter-gatherers who supposedly hadn't yet developed agriculture or complex society. Yet they moved stones weighing many tons and carved intricate reliefs. The precision of ancient Egyptian stonework, fitting blocks together so tightly that you cannot slip a razor blade between them, done without the modern tools we assume are necessary. The astronomical knowledge encoded in ancient monuments, Stonehenge aligned with solstices and eclipses, Mayan calendars of remarkable accuracy, Polynesian navigators crossing thousands of miles of open ocean using only stars, waves, and bird behavior. These were not primitive peoples stumbling through existence. They were intelligent, observant, capable humans who lacked our technology, but not our mental capacity. Advanced metallurgy, early bronze and ironwork. The Bronze Age, beginning around 3000 BC in some regions, required sophisticated knowledge. Bronze is an alloy of copper and tin. Someone had to discover that combining these metals in the right proportions created a material superior to either alone. They had to develop furnaces that could reach the necessary temperatures. They had to learn casting, forging, annealing. These are not simple skills stumbled upon by accident. Ironworking is even more complex. Iron requires higher temperatures than bronze. The ore must be smelted, purified, worked. Steel, an iron-carbon alloy, requires even more precise control of materials and heating. Yet Genesis chapter 4 mentions Tubal-Cain, the forger of all instruments of bronze and iron. This is in the early chapters of Genesis, describing what is portrayed as ancient civilization. Advanced metalworking from the beginning, not as a late development after thousands of years of primitive tool use. Archaeological evidence supports sophisticated metallurgy appearing relatively suddenly in various locations. Once the knowledge existed, it spread. But it doesn't show a clear progression from crude to refined over vast periods. It appears as if people who understood complex metallurgy were present early in the archaeological record. Let your thoughts rest on this. Ancient humans as intelligent as you, looking up at the same stars, working metal, building monuments, navigating oceans, creating art and music and poetry. Not primitive, just different. Living in a different technological context, but with the same human capacity for creativity, problem solving, and wonder. We've also had to revise our understanding of our closest extinct relatives. Neanderthal behavior, intelligent early humans. For decades after Neanderthals were discovered, they were portrayed as brutish, stooped, unintelligent, primitive cousins who lost the evolutionary competition to superior Homo sapiens. This view has been completely overturned. Neanderthals buried their dead, sometimes with grave goods, suggesting belief in an afterlife, or at least ritual respect for the deceased. They created art, painting, and engraving in caves. They made sophisticated tools, sometimes using specialized techniques that required multiple steps. They cared for injured and elderly members of their groups, as evidenced by fossils showing severe injuries that had healed, which would have required others to care for the individual during recovery. They made jewelry and decorated themselves with pigments. They controlled fire and cooked their food. Most remarkably, we now know that Neanderthals and modern humans interbred. Most people of European and Asian descent carry 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA. We didn't just encounter them and outcompete them. We mated with them. We were compatible enough to produce fertile offspring. In a very real sense, Neanderthals aren't fully extinct. Parts of their genome live on in us. The picture that emerges is not of a primitive subhuman species, but of intelligent humans adapted to Ice Age Europe, with culture and capability and consciousness. Different from us in some ways, yes, but not inferior, not primitive, just human in a slightly different expression. As your consciousness dims toward sleep, consider this continuity, the human capacity for thought, for art, for compassion, stretching back far into the past. Your Neanderthal ancestors, if you have European or Asian heritage, were not shambling brutes. They were people who loved and grieved and created and survived in a harsh world. Finally, we come to human ancestry itself. Genesis chapter 3, verse 20 states, "The man called his wife's name Eve, because she was the mother of all living." Human ancestry. Eve as mother of all living. The claim that all humans descend from a single female ancestor. For centuries, this was taken purely as religious doctrine. One woman at the beginning of humanity from whom all others descended. With the understanding of evolution and the diversity of human populations, this seemed like obvious mythology. Humans evolved from earlier hominids. We branched from common ancestors. There was no single original human, no Eve. But then came mitochondrial DNA studies. Mitochondria, the energy-producing structures in your cells, contain their own small genome separate from the DNA in your cell nucleus. And mitochondrial DNA is inherited only from your mother. Your father's mitochondria don't make it into the fertilized egg. This means mitochondrial DNA is passed down through an unbroken maternal line. When scientists studied mitochondrial DNA from people all over the world, they discovered something remarkable. All human mitochondrial DNA traces back to a single woman who lived in Africa somewhere between 100,000 and 200,000 years ago. She's been called mitochondrial Eve. She wasn't the only woman alive at the time, but she's the only one whose maternal line survived unbroken to the present. Every other maternal line died out at some point, but hers continued. All living humans carry mitochondria descended from hers. She is, in a very real genetic sense, the mother of all living humans. The biblical name Eve, given thousands of years ago, turns out to describe a genetic reality we only discovered with modern DNA sequencing technology. One woman, deep in our ancestry, from whom we all descend through an unbroken maternal line. This doesn't prove the Genesis account literally, of course. Mitochondrial Eve lived long before the time frame suggested by biblical chronology, and she wasn't the only woman alive. But the core claim that all humans share a common female ancestor, that there is an Eve who is mother of all living, turns out to be genetically verifiable. We are all related. We all come from the same roots. We are, in the deepest sense, one family. Let this final thought embrace you. Every person you've ever met, every person who has ever lived, shares a grandmother deep in the African past. We are all cousins, all branches of the same family tree. The divisions we create, the categories we imagine, are recent and superficial. At the deepest level, we are one human family, all children of the same mother, all carrying her mitochondria in our cells, all heir to the same deep heritage. Animals with innate wisdom teaching us about the complexity of life. Creatures of immense power, whether behemoth or dinosaur, that once walked the earth. Ancient humans far more capable than we imagined, working metal and building monuments and navigating by the stars. Neanderthals who were not primitive, but intelligent and creative, who live on in our genes. And all of us, every human alive, descended from one woman, mother of all living, whose mitochondria we carry, linking us across continents and millennia. The story of life on this planet is older and stranger and more wonderful than we often realize, full of mysteries that science slowly uncovers, finding sometimes that ancient texts pointed toward truths we've only recently confirmed. We are part of this story, connected to all life, carrying the heritage of countless generations, standing at the newest edge of an ancient continuity. Rest in this connection. You are part of the story of life on Earth, part of the human family, carrying ancient wisdom in your instincts, ancient genes in your cells, ancient heritage in your consciousness, part of something vastly larger than yourself, yet valued as an individual, unique and irreplaceable. Sleep now, child of Eve, cousin to all humanity, heir to ancient wisdom. Let these truths about your place in the story of life on Earth carry you gently into rest. The long history continues, and you are part of it, drifting now into the darkness that connects all sleep, all rest, all peaceful letting go. Your body is deeply relaxed now, surrendered to rest. Your mind drifts easily, receptive and calm. We turn now to the practical wisdom embedded in ancient texts. Knowledge about health and disease, cleanliness and contamination, survival and thriving. Simple instructions given thousands of years ago that anticipated discoveries we would only make with microscopes and scientific method. Let these gentle truths wash over you like a healing balm. Leviticus chapter 13 contains detailed instructions about skin diseases, particularly what's translated as leprosy. The instructions are remarkably specific. If someone has a suspicious skin condition, they are to be brought to a priest. The priest examines the condition. If it appears to be spreading, the person is to be isolated. Medical quarantine. Isolation of disease. The infected person must live alone outside the camp until the condition clears. For thousands of years, these regulations seemed purely religious. Ritual purity laws with no practical purpose beyond obedience to divine command. But consider what these instructions actually accomplish. They isolate people with contagious diseases. They prevent disease spread through the community. They establish observation periods to determine if conditions are truly contagious or just temporary irritations. The principle of quarantine, isolating the sick to protect the healthy, is fundamental to controlling infectious disease. But this principle wasn't scientifically established until the 19th century when germ theory was developed. Before that, no one understood how diseases spread. Miasma theory, the idea that bad air caused illness, dominated medical thinking. Contagion, as we understand it, wasn't recognized. Yet the Levitical Code, written perhaps 3,500 years ago, mandated quarantine, 7-day observation periods, isolation of those with spreading conditions, inspection and reinspection to determine when someone could safely return to the community. These are the basics of infection control, written long before anyone understood bacteria or viruses, before anyone knew why these measures worked. They simply worked. During the Black Death in medieval Europe, Jewish communities often had lower mortality rates than surrounding populations. Some historians attribute this partly to Jewish communities following Levitical sanitation and quarantine laws as religious practice, inadvertently protecting themselves from plague through ancient hygienic wisdom. Breathe slowly and let this settle in your mind. Ancient peoples who couldn't see germs nonetheless developed practices that limited their spread. Instructions given for religious reasons that happen to embody profound medical wisdom. Quarantine protecting communities thousands of years before anyone understood why isolation of the sick was necessary. The sanitation laws go beyond quarantine. Deuteronomy chapter 23 verses 12 through 13 give specific instructions for waste disposal. You shall have a place outside the camp, and you shall go out to it. And you shall have a trowel with your tools. And when you sit down outside, you shall dig a hole with it, and turn back and cover up your excrement. Sanitary laws. Waste disposal. Human waste, buried outside the living area, covered with soil. This seems obvious to us now. Of course you don't want human waste in your living space. Of course it should be buried. But for most of human history, waste disposal was not handled carefully. Medieval cities threw waste into streets. Chamber pots were emptied out windows. Human waste contaminated water supplies. The connection between poor sanitation and disease wasn't understood until the mid-19th century, when John Snow traced a cholera outbreak to a contaminated water pump. Yet here in Deuteronomy, written perhaps 3,000 years earlier, are explicit instructions. Designate a place outside the camp. Dig a hole. Cover the waste. This prevents contamination of water and food. It prevents the spread of parasites and bacteria that thrive in human waste. It dramatically reduces disease transmission. These simple practices, if followed, would prevent many of the diseases that plagued humanity for millennia. Cholera, dysentery, typhoid, hepatitis A, polio. All these diseases spread through fecal-oral contamination. All are dramatically reduced by proper sanitation. The Israelites were given instructions that, if followed, would protect them from these scourges without anyone needing to understand the mechanism. The rules worked, even when no one knew why. Imagine the difference this made. While surrounding nations allowed waste to accumulate in and around dwellings, the Israelites buried it outside their camp. While others drank water contaminated by human waste, the Israelites maintained cleaner water sources. The health benefits would have been substantial, attributable in their minds to God's blessing for obedience, but rooted in practices that prevented disease transmission. Let your body relax even more deeply. You live in a time when sanitation is understood and widely practiced, at least in developed nations. Clean water flows from taps. Waste is carried away in sewers. You benefit from knowledge that took humanity thousands of years to fully understand and implement. Rest in this protection, this invisible shield of public health that surrounds you. The dietary laws in Leviticus also contain wisdom we're only recently appreciating fully. Health from whole foods. Dietary wisdom. The Israelites were given detailed instructions about what they could and couldn't eat. No pork, no shellfish, no carrion, no blood. Animals had to chew cud and have split hooves. Fish had to have fins and scales. These seemed like arbitrary religious rules for most of history. But consider the practical effects. The prohibition against pork eliminated trichinosis, a parasitic disease common in undercooked pork. The prohibition against shellfish eliminated the risk of paralytic shellfish poisoning and other toxins that accumulate in filter-feeding mollusks. The prohibition against eating animals that died naturally prevented consumption of diseased meat. The requirement to drain blood removed a medium where bacteria multiply rapidly. The permitted foods were, generally speaking, safer in a pre-refrigeration world. Ruminant animals like cattle and sheep, with their multi-chambered stomachs, are less likely to harbor parasites dangerous to humans. Fish with scales and fins tend to be free-swimming species less likely to accumulate toxins than bottom feeders. The dietary laws steered people toward foods that were safer and away from foods that posed higher risks. Beyond specific prohibitions, the biblical diet emphasized whole foods: grains, fruits, vegetables, meat from clean animals, olive oil, honey. There's no mention of processed foods, refined sugars, or the industrial food products that dominate modern diets. The diet described in Scripture is remarkably close to what modern nutritionists now recommend. Whole grains instead of refined flour, fresh fruits and vegetables, lean meats, healthy fats from olives and nuts, limited sweeteners. We're discovering that many modern diseases, diabetes, heart disease, obesity, certain cancers, are strongly linked to processed foods, excessive sugar, and poor nutrition. The prescription is often to return to a diet closer to what humans ate historically. Whole foods, minimally processed, the kind of diet that biblical peoples would have eaten naturally. Daniel chapter 1 tells the story of Daniel and his friends requesting vegetables and water instead of the rich food and wine from the king's table. After 10 days on this simple diet, they appeared healthier than those eating the royal food. Whether this is historical or parable, it captures a truth. Simple whole foods often promote better health than rich, elaborate fare. Let this wisdom settle into your resting body. The food you eat becomes you. Nutrition from whole, Unprocessed sources provides what your body needs without the harmful additives and excessive processing that create health problems. Ancient dietary wisdom, given for religious reasons, embodies principles we're rediscovering as scientific nutrition. Now we go smaller, to the microscopic world. Job chapter 36, verse 27 speaks of water drops being drawn up in mist, small invisible particles of water suspended in air. The idea that things exist too small to see, but numerous enough to have visible effects. Bacterial antiquity. Ancient microbes. Bacteria are among the oldest life forms on Earth. Fossil evidence suggests bacteria existed at least 3.5 billion years ago, perhaps earlier. They've survived every mass extinction. They've adapted to every environment on Earth, from Antarctic ice to deep-sea thermal vents, to the acidic drainage of mines. They live in the soil, the water, the air, and throughout your body. Your body contains roughly as many bacterial cells as human cells. The microbiome in your gut alone weighs several pounds and contains trillions of individual bacteria representing thousands of species. These bacteria are essential to your health. They help digest food, produce vitamins, regulate your immune system, protect against harmful microbes, and even influence your mood and behavior through chemical signals. We live in a world permeated by microscopic life. Every breath contains thousands of bacteria and viruses. Every surface you touch hosts millions of microorganisms. Most are harmless or beneficial. Only a tiny fraction cause disease. For most of history, humans had no idea this microscopic world existed. We couldn't see it. We could only see the effects: disease, fermentation, decay, without understanding the invisible agents causing these changes. The biblical text doesn't explicitly mention bacteria, of course. The writers had no microscopes. But there's an understanding throughout Scripture that things exist beyond what we can see. That the world contains layers of reality, visible and invisible. That small things can have large effects. That purity and contamination operate at levels beyond what the eye can detect. The sanitation and quarantine laws make sense in light of germ theory, even though the writers didn't have germ theory. They understood empirically that certain practices led to health and others to disease. They codified these practices as religious law, ensuring they would be followed. The mechanism was invisible, but the effect was real. As you drift deeper towards sleep, consider the invisible world within and around you. Trillions of bacteria, most of them your allies, working to keep you healthy. Ancient life forms that have existed since nearly the beginning of life on Earth, now living in symbiosis with you. You are not just a human being. You are an ecosystem, a walking world containing multitudes of microscopic life. Health comes from balance, from practices that support beneficial microbes while limiting harmful ones. Cleanliness, yes, but not sterility. We need our microbiome, whole foods that feed beneficial gut bacteria, clean water free of pathogens, isolation when sick to prevent spreading infection to others. These ancient principles, given as religious law, embody deep wisdom about maintaining health in a world full of invisible life. The instructions in Leviticus and Deuteronomy kept ancient peoples healthier than they would have been otherwise. Quarantine limited epidemics. Sanitation prevented waterborne disease. Dietary laws reduced food poisoning and parasites. These weren't empty rituals. They were practical wisdom. encoded as divine command to ensure compliance, protecting communities who followed them without understanding the full reasons why. Modern medicine has given us vastly more knowledge and capability. We can see bacteria under microscopes. We can culture them, identify them, target them with antibiotics. We understand disease transmission at the molecular level. We can prevent and cure diseases that would have been death sentences in ancient times. Yet the fundamental principles, isolate the sick, dispose of waste properly, eat wholesome food, maintain cleanliness, remain the same. Ancient wisdom, now understood but not improved upon in its basics. You are the beneficiary of millennia of accumulated knowledge about health and survival. Ancient practices preserved in religious texts, scientific discoveries that explained why those practices worked. Modern medicine that has built on these foundations, all of it serving to protect you, to keep you healthy, to help you thrive. Rest now in this protection. Your body knows how to heal. Your immune system knows how to fight. Your microbiome knows how to maintain balance. And the practices that support health, cleanliness, good nutrition, rest, isolation when sick, have been known for thousands of years, preserved and passed down because they worked, even when no one fully understood why. Sleep in safety. Your body is designed for health. The ancient wisdom that promoted survival is now enhanced by modern knowledge. You are protected by layers of understanding, ancient and modern, religious and scientific, all pointing toward the same truths about how to maintain life and health in a world full of both danger and beauty. Let the tension drain away. Your body rests in a safe place, clean, nourished, protected by knowledge accumulated over thousands of years. Ancient sanitation laws and modern medicine, both working to the same end, preserving life, promoting health, allowing you to rest peacefully without fear. Drift now, deeper, into the healing darkness of sleep. Your body knows what to do. The ancient microbes within you work through the night, maintaining balance, supporting life. The practices of health surround and protect you. Rest easy. Sleep deep. Let thousands of years of wisdom cradle you in safety as you surrender to sleep. Your body is almost completely still now, breathing shallow and slow. Your consciousness hovers at the edge of sleep, receptive to stories that blur the line between history and mystery. We turn now to events so dramatic, so earth-shaping, that they left marks on both the land and human memory. Events recorded in ancient texts that challenge our understanding of what's possible. Let these stories carry you deeper into rest. Genesis chapters 6 through 9 describe a flood, not a local overflow of a river, but a global catastrophe. Waters covering the entire earth, mountains submerged, all land animals and birds perishing, except those preserved in an ark. The world reshaped by water. Global flood evidence, sedimentary layers. Nearly every ancient culture has a flood story. The Epic of Gilgamesh from Mesopotamia describes Utnapishtim surviving a great flood in a boat. Hindu texts describe Manu saved from a flood by a fish. Greek mythology tells of Deucalion and Pyrrha surviving a flood sent by Zeus. Native American traditions, Chinese legends, Aboriginal Australian stories. Flood narratives appear across human cultures separated by vast distances and oceans. The ubiquity of these stories suggests either a common origin, perhaps a memory of a real catastrophic event, or multiple regional floods so devastating they became enshrined in cultural memory. Geologists have discovered evidence of massive regional floods in Earth's history. The flooding of the Black Sea Basin about 7,500 years ago. The catastrophic draining of glacial Lake Missoula in North America, creating the channeled scablands of Washington state. Ice Age melt, causing dramatic sea level rise that would have inundated coastal settlements. But beyond specific identifiable floods, the Earth itself bears the mark of water on a massive scale. Sedimentary layers. Much of the Earth's surface is covered with sedimentary rock, limestone, sandstone, shale, formed from sediments deposited by water. These layers stretch across continents, sometimes containing marine fossils far from any current ocean, at elevations thousands of feet above sea level. The Grand Canyon exposes layer upon layer of sedimentary rock, each one representing sediments laid down over time. Similar layered formations exist worldwide. Marine fossils have been found on mountain peaks, seashells embedded in limestone in deserts. The evidence that water once covered areas now high and dry is undeniable. The debate is about scale and timing. Were these layers deposited slowly over hundreds of millions of years by gradual processes, as standard geology maintains? Or do some layers represent catastrophic deposition during dramatic flood events? The evidence allows for both interpretations depending on assumptions and frameworks. What's clear is that water has shaped the Earth's surface profoundly, that catastrophic floods have occurred in Earth's history, that the world has been repeatedly reshaped by water on scales hard to imagine. Whether a single global flood, as described in Genesis, or multiple regional catastrophes, or the cumulative effect of millions of years of water action, the Earth bears the signature of water's transformative power. Let your mind drift across these ancient layers. Stone that was once mud at the bottom of seas. Fossils of creatures buried suddenly, preserved in their death poses. The Earth as a book of stone, recording a history written in sediment and water. Rest in the knowledge that this planet has survived dramatic changes, has been reshaped by forces beyond human control, yet remains stable enough to support life, to provide you with solid ground on which to rest. After the flood, Genesis chapter 9 describes God's covenant with Noah. The sign of this covenant is the rainbow. I have set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be a sign of the covenant between me and the earth. When the bow is in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant. Rainbow as sign. Optics and covenant. A rainbow is a physical phenomenon, the result of light interacting with water droplets. Sunlight enters water droplets suspended in the air. The light refracts or bends as it enters the water because light travels at different speeds in water and air. Different wavelengths of light refract at slightly different angles. Inside the droplet, the light reflects off the back surface. Then it refracts again as it exits the droplet. The result is that white light is separated into its component colors: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet, and these colors are spread out in a bow across the sky. The rainbow has always existed as a potential. Whenever sunlight and water droplets were present in the right configuration, a rainbow could form. The physics haven't changed. But Genesis describes God designating the rainbow as a sign, taking a natural phenomenon and investing it with meaning. The covenant rainbow is both entirely natural and deeply significant. This dual nature, natural yet meaningful, characterizes much of how the biblical text treats the world. Natural processes are acknowledged. The world operates according to consistent principles, yet these natural phenomena can carry deeper meaning. They can be signs pointing beyond themselves. The rainbow reminds us of promises, of hope after catastrophe, of beauty emerging from storm. Every culture that has seen rainbows has found them beautiful, has attributed meaning to them. Some see them as bridges between earth and heaven, others as serpents or divine bows. The human response to a rainbow is nearly universal. We stop, we look, we feel something. Wonder, peace, hope. The physics of the rainbow have been understood since Isaac Newton demonstrated that white light contains all colors and that prisms can separate them. We can explain exactly why rainbows form, what conditions are necessary, why they appear as arcs, why the colors appear in that specific order. The explanation doesn't diminish the beauty. The natural mechanism doesn't erase the meaning. As you rest, picture a rainbow arcing across the sky, washed clean by rain. Sunlight behind you, rain ahead of you, and suspended in the air between, a bridge of color. Pure physics producing pure beauty. A sign that storm gives way to calm. That darkness is temporary. That light breaks through. Let this image comfort you. After every storm, the potential for a rainbow. After every hardship, the possibility of beauty and hope. Now we come to one of the most troubling passages in Scripture from a scientific perspective. Joshua chapter 10, verses 12 and 13. Joshua prays for the sun to stand still, and the text states, "The sun stopped in the midst of heaven and did not hurry to set for about a whole day." Sun standing still. Time-defying event. From our perspective, knowing the earth rotates and the sun only appears to move across the sky, this seems impossible. For the sun to appear to stop would require the earth to stop rotating. The physics are staggering. The Earth's surface at the equator moves at about 1,000 miles per hour due to rotation. Stopping that rotation suddenly would be catastrophic. Everything not firmly attached to the ground would continue moving eastward at tremendous speed. Oceans would slosh over continents. The atmosphere would keep moving, creating winds beyond any hurricane. It would be an extinction-level event. Yet the text describes this happening without catastrophe. Joshua and his army continue fighting. No mention of devastating consequences. Just an extended day allowing victory in battle. How do we understand this? Some suggest poetic language. The day felt long because so much happened. Time seeming to slow during intense experiences is a common human perception. Others suggest a local optical phenomenon, perhaps unusual refraction of light, making the sun appear to remain in the sky longer than usual. Some suggest a temporary change in Earth's rotation that God controlled along with all the consequences, preventing catastrophe while granting Joshua's prayer. The text itself is ambiguous. It quotes from the Book of Jashar, a now lost ancient text, suggesting this was already an old story by the time Joshua was written. It describes the event from the perspective of observers on the ground, for whom the sun appeared to stop. It doesn't explain the mechanism, only the observed effect and the interpretation. God answered prayer, granting victory. What's interesting is that several ancient cultures have legends of a long day or night. The Chinese Yao Canon mentions a long day during the reign of Emperor Yao. Aztec and Inca legends describe a night that didn't end. Greek historians mention a day when the sun stood still. These stories aren't identical to Joshua's account, and most are difficult to date precisely, but the existence of similar legends across cultures is intriguing. Perhaps there was an event, a day when something unusual happened with light or time perception that entered multiple cultural memories interpreted through different lenses. Perhaps these are independent legends that share a theme. Perhaps Joshua's account is theological rather than strictly historical, making a point about God's power and response to prayer through a dramatic story. Or perhaps something scientifically inexplicable occurred, an intervention that suspends natural law for a purpose. The passage remains a mystery. It challenges naturalistic assumptions. It describes something that seems physically impossible. Yet there it stands in the text, an ancient account of a day that wouldn't end, when time itself seemed to pause for human purposes. Let this mystery hang in your mind without resolution. Not everything must be explained. Not every question has an answer that satisfies both faith and reason completely. Some things remain mysterious, inviting wonder rather than demanding explanation. A day when the sun stood still, when time bent to prayer, when the impossible became momentarily actual. Whether literal or symbolic, whether physical or perceptual, the story speaks of a reality beyond ordinary experience, of moments when the normal rules don't apply, of divine intervention in human affairs at moments of desperate need. As sleep overtakes you, rest in the knowledge that you don't have to understand everything. Mystery is not the enemy of truth. Some things remain beyond full comprehension, and that's acceptable. The world contains more than we can explain. Reality is stranger and more wonderful than our theories can fully capture. A flood that reshaped the world, leaving its signature in stone and sediment and story. A rainbow that bridges physics and promise, natural phenomenon and divine sign, occurring according to optical laws, yet carrying meaning beyond mere refraction. A day when time paused, when the sun stood still, when the impossible bent to prayer and purpose. Earth-shaping events, signs that point beyond themselves, mysteries that invite faith rather than demanding proof. These stories, whether history or allegory, whether literal or symbolic, speak to deep truths. That the world can change dramatically. That beauty emerges from catastrophe. That natural laws, however reliable, don't exhaust reality. That meaning exists beyond mechanism. That purpose operates in and through the physical world. The earth has been shaped by forces beyond our control, by water and fire, by time and catastrophe, by processes slow and sudden. Yet it remains our home, stable enough to support life, beautiful enough to inspire, mysterious enough to invite wonder. The ground beneath you has a history written in stone and sediment. The sky above you displays signs of light and color, physics and promise. And time itself, however we measure and explain it, contains moments that seem to transcend ordinary duration, when everything changes, when the impossible occurs. Rest in this world that has survived so much, that has been flooded and dried, that displays rainbows after storms, that moves through time according to laws we can measure, yet occasionally seems to pause for purposes beyond the physical. You are safe here, On this ancient earth, beneath this promise-filled sky, living in time that flows steadily toward tomorrow, yet occasionally seems to stretch to contain all we need. Let it all go now. The floodwaters recede into memory. The rainbow fades into the gentle dark behind your eyelids. Time slows and stops as you enter sleep's timeless realm, where a moment can contain eternity and a night can pass like minutes. The earth-shaping events are long past. The signs remain subtle and beautiful, pointing toward realities beyond themselves. Sleep now, held by the earth that has survived catastrophe, blessed by the sky that displays promises in refracted light, drifting in time that flows according to its own mysterious purposes. All is well. All has been shaped toward this moment, this rest, this peace, this gentle surrender to sleep. Your breathing is barely perceptible now. Your body has surrendered fully to rest. Your mind drifts in that twilight space between waking and sleep, where the boundaries between possible and impossible blur and soften. We come now to the most mysterious territory of all, not just unexplained phenomena, but claimed impossibilities, events that stand in direct contradiction to natural law, miracles. And at the center of these mysteries, a person whose very existence challenges our categories. Let these final deep mysteries carry you into complete rest. Exodus chapter 16 describes a phenomenon that sustained the Israelites for 40 years in the wilderness. Manna from heaven. Each morning, bread-like flakes would appear on the ground with the dew. The people gathered it, ground it, baked it, and ate it. It appeared 6 days each week. On the 6th day, a double portion appeared so none would appear on the Sabbath. This continued for 40 years until the Israelites entered the Promised Land, sustenance without source. Various natural explanations have been proposed. Some suggest it was a secretion from tamarisk trees, which does produce small white flakes. Others point to certain insects that excrete a sweet substance. Some suggest a lichen or fungal growth, but none of these explanations fully fit the description. The biblical manna appeared daily in quantities sufficient to feed perhaps 2 million people. It appeared 6 days and not 7, perfectly coordinating with religious observance. It could not be stored overnight except on the 6th day, when it could be stored for the Sabbath. It ceased entirely when the Israelites reached Canaan. The account describes something beyond known natural phenomena, food appearing without planting or harvesting. No source, no agriculture, no supply chain, just daily provision appearing with the morning dew. For 40 years, feeding a nation wandering in desert places where agriculture was impossible, sustenance without source. Whether this was a natural phenomenon used providentially, or something entirely supernatural, or a theological narrative about God's provision rather than literal daily bread, the story speaks to absolute dependence, to receiving what you need without being able to produce it yourself, to daily trust that what's necessary will appear. Let this image comfort you as you rest. Your needs have been met today. You have food, shelter, safety. Tomorrow's needs remain unseen, but they will be met as today's were. Daily provision, daily sustenance, not hoarded, not controlled, but received with trust. Like manna appearing with the morning, what you need comes to you. Rest in this trust. Let go of anxiety about tomorrow. Today's provision is enough. Sleep peacefully, knowing that sustenance comes even when the source is mysterious. Exodus chapter 14 describes another impossible event. the Israelites trapped between the Egyptian army and the Red Sea. Moses stretches out his hand, and the sea parts. Water stands up in walls on either side. The seabed becomes dry ground. The Israelites cross on foot. When the Egyptians follow, the water returns and they drown. Parting of the Red Sea. No full scientific model. Some have suggested natural explanations. Strong east winds can push shallow water aside temporarily, creating fordable areas. Tsunami-like effects from earthquakes can cause water to recede and then return. Underwater topography might create channels that become passable at low tide, but none of these fully explain the biblical account. Water standing in walls, dry ground appearing instantly, perfect timing for escape and destruction. The control and precision described exceeds what natural phenomena typically provide. The text describes something beyond natural law. Water obeying a command. Physical matter responding to human will expressed through divine authority. The laws that govern how water behaves, gravity, fluid dynamics, pressure, temporarily suspended or overridden. The impossible made momentarily possible for purposes of deliverance. Water is powerful. It flows according to consistent principles. It seeks the lowest point. It cannot be made to stand up in walls by human effort. Yet the story declares this happened, not through manipulation of natural forces, but through direct intervention. Reality temporarily restructured to allow passage where none should exist. Whether this happened exactly as described, or whether it's a theological narrative about God's deliverance using poetic language, or whether some natural phenomenon was interpreted through the lens of faith, the story speaks to rescue when all seems lost, to impossible escapes, to divine intervention at the moment of greatest need, to waters that threaten becoming waters that save. Breathe slowly and let yourself sink deeper. You are safe. The waters of life that sometimes threaten to overwhelm have been navigated. You have passed through dangers and emerged. The sea that seemed impassable opened before you. The threats that pursued have not overtaken you. You are here now, safe, resting. The impossible escapes of your life may not have been as dramatic as parted seas, but you have been delivered nonetheless. Rest in this safety. Matthew chapter 14 describes Jesus walking on water. The disciples are in a boat struggling against wind and waves. In the fourth watch of the night, Jesus comes to them, walking on the surface of the lake. Peter steps out of the boat and walks briefly before fear causes him to sink. Walking on water. Physics-defying act. Water cannot support human weight. A person is denser than water. Without displacement of enough water to equal the person's weight, they sink. This is simple physics. Archimedes' principle, to walk on water, requires either changing the properties of water, changing the properties of the human body, or introducing some force that counters gravity and provides support where none should exist. The account offers no naturalistic explanation, no mention of hidden platforms or shallow water or misperception. Simply Jesus walking on the surface as if it were solid ground, an act that violates the physical laws that govern matter, an impossibility presented as fact. Some suggest the story is symbolic, Jesus mastering chaos, represented by the sea, faith enabling the impossible, shown by Peter's brief success and quick failure, the divine nature of Jesus demonstrated by power over elements. These symbolic readings may all be true while still leaving open the question of whether the event literally occurred. What strikes readers is the casual nature of the miracle in the account. Jesus isn't described as straining with effort or performing a ritual. He simply walks, as naturally as walking on land, as if for him, the distinction between solid and liquid doesn't apply in the same way, as if physical laws are more like habits that can be overridden by one who established them. The walking on water, like the parting of the sea, speaks to mastery over elements, to power beyond human capacity, to the possibility that reality is more flexible than we assume, that consciousness and will under certain conditions can override physical law, that the impossible remains impossible only until it isn't. Let your thoughts drift across this image. Water solid beneath feet that should sink, natural law suspended, the impossible briefly actual. You don't need to walk on water. You need only rest. But the story whispers that reality contains more than we understand, that the boundaries we assume are firm might be more permeable than we think, that consciousness, will, and purpose can interact with physical reality in ways we haven't fully grasped. And now we come to the central claim of Christianity, the event that defines everything else, the resurrection of Jesus. Medical impossibility, a man crucified, confirmed dead, sealed in a tomb. 3 days later, alive, not resuscitated, not merely revived, but transformed, possessing a body that could be touched, yet could pass through locked doors, that could eat fish, yet could appear and disappear, that bore the marks of crucifixion, yet was glorified, no longer subject to death. Death is final. This is perhaps the most certain fact of biology. When brain activity ceases and remains ceased, when cells begin to die from lack of oxygen, when rigor mortis sets in and decomposition begins, there is no return. Death is the one boundary all humans cross, and none return from. Medical science can sometimes resuscitate people whose hearts have stopped recently, but there's a narrow window. After days, resurrection is not just difficult, it's impossible. Yet the earliest Christians staked everything on the claim that Jesus rose from the dead. They didn't say he survived crucifixion somehow. They said he died and then lived again. They claimed to have seen him, touched him, eaten with him, spoken with him. Hundreds of witnesses, according to Paul's letter to the Corinthians. People willing to die rather than recant their testimony that they had seen the risen Christ. The transformation of the disciples is itself remarkable. Before the resurrection, they were fearful, hiding, scattered. Peter denied even knowing Jesus. After the resurrection, they were bold, proclaiming publicly, willing to face persecution and death. Something changed them fundamentally. They became absolutely convinced that death had been defeated, that Jesus lived, that everything he taught was vindicated. Skeptics propose various explanations. The disciples hallucinated. They stole the body and lied. They went to the wrong tomb. Jesus didn't actually die, but recovered in the tomb. The stories developed gradually over time, turning a spiritual metaphor into a physical claim. Each explanation has problems. Mass hallucinations of the same detailed figure are not documented elsewhere. The disciples had no motive to die for a lie that benefited them nothing. The tomb's location was known and could be checked. Roman crucifixion was brutally effective, and the soldier's spear thrust confirmed death. The resurrection remains the central mystery and the central claim. Either it happened, and reality is fundamentally different than we assumed. Death is not final. Consciousness survived bodily death, and one person demonstrated power over the ultimate boundary. Or it didn't happen, and we must explain how this belief transformed history despite being false. The resurrection, if it occurred, is not just a miracle. It's the miracle. It's not a suspension of natural law, but a transformation of it. A demonstration that death is not the end, that physical reality is not ultimate, that consciousness and purpose transcend material limitation. It's a claim that changes everything about how we understand existence. Let this mystery rest in your mind without needing resolution. You are drifting toward sleep, toward a temporary cessation of consciousness, a little death from which you will wake renewed. Sleep is the small practice of death and resurrection we perform daily. We surrender consciousness, trusting we will return. We let go of the day, trusting there will be morning. The resurrection claim says that this pattern, death and rebirth, ending and new beginning, is woven into the deepest structure of reality, that nothing is finally lost, that death is transition, not termination, that love and consciousness and purpose survive even the ultimate dissolution. Whether you believe this literally or hold it as metaphor, whether you find it compelling or impossible, the claim itself is remarkable. That one person defeated death. That love proves stronger than the grave. That the worst that can happen, death, is not final. That hope survives even complete defeat. That Sunday morning comes after Friday's crucifixion. Manna appearing without source, teaching dependence and trust. Water parting to allow escape, teaching deliverance from impossible situations. Water becoming solid beneath feet, teaching mastery over elements and the flexibility of reality. And death reversed, teaching that nothing is final, that the ultimate boundary can be crossed, that resurrection is possible. These miracles, whether literal or symbolic or some combination, speak to deep human needs and hopes. We need sustenance. We need deliverance. We need power over chaos. We need hope beyond death. The miracles meet these needs in the most dramatic way possible, not through gradual progress or human effort, but through direct intervention, through the impossible becoming actual. Jesus, as portrayed in the Gospels, is not just a teacher or prophet or good person. He is presented as someone in whom the natural and supernatural intersect, someone through whom the impossible becomes possible, someone who demonstrates that reality is more than materialism suggests, that consciousness and will and love are as fundamental as matter and energy, perhaps more so. Science studies what is repeatable, predictable, measurable. Miracles, by definition, are none of these. They are singular events that violate natural law. They cannot be replicated in laboratories or reduced to equations. They remain outside the bounds of scientific investigation. This doesn't mean they didn't happen. It means science cannot adjudicate their reality. They belong to a different category of claim, requiring different types of evidence, testimony, transformed lives, historical investigation, personal encounter. You don't need to resolve these questions tonight. You don't need to decide what's literal and what's symbolic, what's historical and what's theological narrative. Let the mysteries remain mysterious. Let the impossible claims hang in the air like questions without immediate answers. Some things are meant to be pondered, not solved. Some truths are encountered in experience, rather than proven by argument. What these stories offer, whether you take them literally or symbolically, is hope. Hope that you are not alone. Hope that impossible situations have solutions. Hope that sustenance comes even in desert places. Hope that death is not the final word. Hope that reality is far stranger and more wonderful than mere materialism suggests. As you surrender fully to sleep now, let these impossible stories carry you into rest. You don't need miracles tonight. You need sleep. But the stories whisper that the world contains more than we understand. That consciousness matters. That will and purpose and love are forces that interact with physical reality in ways we're still discovering. That the impossible sometimes becomes possible. That hope survives even when reason says all is lost. Sleep now. Let go. Surrender to the little death that is sleep, trusting in the little resurrection that is morning. The miracles, whether past events or eternal symbols or both, speak of a reality larger than what we can measure. A reality that includes you, sustains you, delivers you, and promises that death itself is not final. Rest in mystery. Rest in hope. Rest in the knowledge that reality is far more than we can explain, and that this more includes love, purpose, meaning, and the possibility of the impossible. The person of Jesus, whether viewed as historical figure, divine incarnation, or symbolic representation of ultimate reality, stands at the center of these mysteries, inviting faith rather than demanding proof, offering hope rather than explanation. Let it all fade now. The manna, the sea, the water walking, the empty tomb, all fading into the peace of sleep. The mysteries remain. Tomorrow you can consider them again. Tonight, you simply rest, held by a reality larger than you understand, loved by a universe that sustains your existence, invited into trust that tomorrow will bring what today cannot provide. Sleep deeply. The impossible has become your lullaby. The miracles whisper peace, and the one who performed them, or represents them, or embodies them, stands watch over your rest, promising that morning always comes, that sustenance appears, that death is not final, that love survives everything. Rest now. Sleep. The mysteries will keep until morning. Tonight, you are held. Tomorrow you will wake, and that itself is miracle enough. You are at the very edge of sleep now, consciousness barely holding on, thoughts dissolving into fragments. We come to the final mysteries, the ones closest to you, the ones you carry within, not distant cosmic phenomena or ancient miracles, but the immediate mystery of your own consciousness, the feelings you feel, the thoughts you think, the sense that your existence means something. Let these last reflections carry you over the threshold into deep, peaceful sleep. Consider joy, not just pleasure, which can be explained neurologically as dopamine release, as reward circuits firing, but joy. That sudden expansion of the heart when you witness something beautiful. The overwhelming gratitude that sometimes washes over you for no clear reason. The sense of rightness and completion in certain moments. The way music can move you to tears. The way love feels like it transcends your individual existence. Emotion's origin. Joy beyond materialism. Modern neuroscience can map which brain regions activate during emotional experiences. We can measure neurotransmitters and hormones. We can see which neural pathways are involved in processing emotions. We can even stimulate certain brain areas and evoke emotional responses. All of this is true and valuable, but it doesn't quite capture the felt experience, the qualitative nature of what it's like to feel joy. This is called the hard problem of consciousness. How do physical processes, neurons firing, chemicals flowing, give rise to subjective experience? How does matter become aware of itself? How does the third-person observable world of brain activity become the first-person felt world of experience? Why is there something it's like to be you, rather than you being simply a complex mechanism processing information with no inner life? Materialism struggles with this. If consciousness is just brain activity, then all mental experiences should reduce to physical descriptions. But try describing the redness of red, the taste of chocolate, the feeling of longing to someone who has never experienced these things. The physical descriptions don't convey the experience itself. Something remains beyond the physical account. The subjective, the qualitative, the felt sense of being. The biblical worldview doesn't explain this scientifically, but it assumes it. You are not just body. You are body and spirit, or body and soul. You are physical and something more, made in the image of God, which implies not just physical form but consciousness, will, the capacity for relationship, creativity, moral awareness. You are matter that has become aware, and that awareness points beyond mere matter. Joy, love, beauty, meaning, these feel irreducible. They feel like they matter in ways that transcend survival value or evolutionary advantage. Yes, emotions serve functions. Fear protects us. Attachment bonds promote care for offspring. But the felt quality of these experiences, the way they seem to point beyond themselves to something transcendent, to objective beauty or goodness or love, this remains mysterious. When you feel deep joy, it doesn't feel like neurons firing. It feels like touching something real, something that exists independent of your brain chemistry. Beauty seems objective, not just a subjective response. Love seems to reveal something true about reality, not just about your internal state. These feelings might be illusions, but they're persistent, universal illusions. Every culture recognizes beauty. Every person feels love. Every human mind intuits that some things matter absolutely, not just instrumentally. Let this mystery comfort you. You are not just a machine. Your consciousness, your feelings, your sense that life has meaning, these are real in ways that transcend neural correlates. You are a mystery to yourself, a unity of matter, and something beyond matter. A physical being with metaphysical depth, body animated by spirit, brain generating mind. Atoms organized in such a way that they become aware, that they can contemplate atoms, that they can experience joy and love and wonder. As you drift, let go of the need to explain. You don't need to solve the hard problem of consciousness. You need only rest in the mystery of being. You exist. You feel. You are aware. And this awareness, this capacity for experience, is itself the deepest miracle, not something to be explained away, but something to be lived, celebrated, received with gratitude. 2 Peter chapter 3 verse 10 speaks of a future day. The heavens will pass away with a roar, and the heavenly bodies will be burned up and dissolved, and the earth and the works that are done on it will be exposed. Verse 12 continues, The heavens will be set on fire and dissolved, and the heavenly bodies will melt as they burn, elements, melting with fervent heat. Atomic fission. For most of history, this seemed like pure apocalyptic imagery. Poetic language for the end of the world, fire consuming everything, matter dissolving, the elements melting. Beautiful in a terrible way, but not literally true. Matter is solid. Stone doesn't melt in normal fires. The earth is not flammable. The metaphor was clear, but the mechanism was impossible. Then came the 20th century. Einstein's equation, E equals mc squared. Matter and energy are interchangeable. The amount of energy contained in matter is staggering, mass multiplied by the speed of light squared. A small amount of matter contains enormous energy. When atoms are split, fission, or fused, fusion, they release this energy. Nuclear reactions convert matter directly into energy on a scale that dwarfs chemical reactions. The atomic bomb demonstrated that elements can indeed melt with fervent heat. Temperatures at the center of a nuclear explosion reach millions of degrees. Matter vaporizes instantly, elements dissolve. The very fabric of material reality breaks down under the intensity of released nuclear energy. What seemed like impossible poetic exaggeration turned out to describe a physical possibility. The sun operates on nuclear fusion, hydrogen atoms fusing into helium, releasing the energy that lights our days. Stars die in supernovae when their cores undergo runaway fusion and fission, releasing energy so vast it can outshine an entire galaxy briefly. The heavier elements in your body, the carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, iron, were forged in the hearts of dying stars in conditions of such extreme temperature and pressure that atomic nuclei fused into new configurations. The universe knows how to release the energy locked in matter. Stars do it constantly. Supernovae do it catastrophically. And humans learned to do it in the mid-20th century, creating weapons that can release nuclear fire. The elements melting with fervent heat is not just poetic, apocalyptic language. It's a description of what happens when matter is subjected to nuclear forces. Whether 2 Peter envisions literal nuclear destruction or uses imagery that happened to predict physics discovered 2,000 years later, the language captures something real. Matter is not solid and permanent. It's frozen energy. Under the right conditions, it can be released, can dissolve back into energy, can melt with heat so intense that nothing physical survives. The material world, which seems so solid and permanent, is actually temporary, built from energy, capable of returning to energy. Let this thought settle without alarm. Everything physical is temporary. The earth, the sun, the stars, all will eventually end. Matter will return to energy. The universe will reach heat, death, or collapse, or transform in ways we cannot predict. Nothing material lasts forever. This could be frightening, or it could be freeing. If nothing physical is permanent, then ultimate meaning cannot rest in physical things. Your body is temporary. Your possessions are temporary. Even the earth is temporary. If your life has meaning, it must be meaning that transcends the physical. Purpose that exists beyond matter. Value that doesn't depend on duration. This is why consciousness matters so much. If you are only matter, then when the matter dissolves, you dissolve completely. But if you are consciousness using matter, awareness expressed through physical form, then perhaps consciousness continues even when its physical substrate ends. The body melts, but the awareness, the person, the soul, perhaps, that transcends the physical dissolution. You don't need to decide this tonight. You need only recognize that the physical is not ultimate. That matter, for all its seeming solidity, is actually temporary and contingent. That if meaning exists, it must be rooted in something beyond the physical. In consciousness, in relationships, in love, in purposes that transcend individual physical existence. Rest in this. Your body will sleep and wake, until one day it sleeps and doesn't wake. This is true for everyone. The material returns to energy eventually, but the love you gave, the consciousness you expressed, the beauty you created and appreciated, the connections you made, these matter in ways that transcend their physical substrates. They point toward meanings that survive the melting of elements. Finally, we return to where we began, to the sheer number of you, the multitude of human beings who have existed and do exist. Genesis chapter 13, verse 16, and similar passages promise Abraham that his descendants will be as numerous as the dust of the earth. Genesis 22, verse 17, promises descendants as numerous as the stars of heaven and the sand on the seashore. Number of humans on earth. Once unimaginable multitudes. When these promises were given, world population was tiny, perhaps tens of millions globally. The idea of descendants numbering in the billions would have been incomprehensible. Yet, this is what happened. Current world population is about 8 billion people. Estimates suggest that over 100 billion humans have lived and died throughout history, multitudes as uncountable as sand grains or stars, each one conscious, each one experiencing their own inner life, each one feeling joy and sorrow, hope and fear, each one a universe of subjective experience. 8 billion simultaneous streams of consciousness right now. Each one as real and vivid and central to itself as your consciousness is to you. The sheer number is staggering. And yet, you matter. Among these multitudes, your consciousness is not diminished. Your experience is not less real because billions of others also experience. Your life has value not because you are rare. You are not. Humans are common. But because consciousness has intrinsic value. Because awareness matters. Because the subjective experience of being, regardless of how many others share similar experiences, is precious. This is the paradox. You are one among billions, yet you are irreplaceable. Your particular perspective, your unique consciousness, has never existed before and will never exist again. The exact configuration of memories, experiences, relationships, thoughts that make up your inner life is singular. When you die, this particular flame of consciousness goes out, and nothing will be exactly like it again. So you are both insignificant and infinitely significant. Insignificant in the cosmic scale, one brief life on one small planet, orbiting one ordinary star among billions. Infinitely significant because you are a conscious being, a subject of experience, a center of awareness, capable of love and joy and meaning. These two truths coexist without contradiction. As you finally surrender fully to sleep, hold both truths gently. You are small, one among multitudes so vast they're uncountable. Your life is brief, your impact limited, your existence a tiny spark in vast darkness. And yet you matter absolutely. Your consciousness is precious, your experience is real, your capacity for love and joy and beauty is a miracle. You are noticed, you are known. Among the multitudes you are singular. The universe that created you, through whatever mechanism, divine will or evolutionary process, or some synthesis of both, has invested in your existence. You are here. You are conscious. You are capable of experiencing beauty and meaning. This is not nothing. This is everything. Sleep now, one among multitudes, yet precious beyond measure. Your emotions are real, pointing beyond mere neurology to something transcendent. The physical world around you, for all its seeming solidity, is temporary, built from energy and returning to energy. But consciousness, awareness, love, these seem to point beyond the physical, to touch something eternal. You don't need answers to these mysteries. You need rest. You need to let go of the questions, the wondering, the seeking for understanding. Tomorrow you can think again. Tonight, you simply exist. One human among billions. One consciousness among multitudes. One brief flame of awareness in the vastness. And that is enough. That is everything. Let the mysteries cradle you now. The origin of your emotions, the temporary nature of all physical things, the multitudes who share existence with you, yet cannot diminish your uniqueness. All of these dissolving into the peace of sleep. You have journeyed from the beginning of the universe to the depths of your own consciousness, from the cosmic to the personal, from the ancient past to the present moment, from questions about stars and seas to questions about meaning and mind, and through it all, mysteries, things science cannot fully explain, things faith cannot fully prove, things that remain wonderful precisely because they remain mysterious. Rest in not knowing. Rest in the mystery of your own existence. Rest in the temporary nature of all things physical and the eternal quality of all things meaningful. Rest in being one among multitudes yet precious beyond measure. Rest in consciousness that emerged from matter yet seems to transcend it. Rest in emotions that feel like they point to objective truth, even though they arise from subjective experience. All the facts about the Bible that science still can't explain fade now into the darkness of sleep. The cosmic origins, the vast universe, the suspended earth, the water cycles and weather systems, the complexity of life, the origins of animals and humans, the wisdom of ancient health practices, the earth-shaping events, the miracles and the person who performed them, and finally, you, the mystery of consciousness, the meaning of existence, the purpose of it all. Science explains much, but it cannot explain everything, and the things it cannot explain, consciousness, meaning, purpose, love, beauty, the qualitative nature of experience, these are not peripheral. They are central to what it means to be human. Sleep now. You are a mystery. You exist in a mysterious universe. You carry mysteries within you. And this is good. This is right. This is exactly as it should be. Not everything must be explained. Not everything can be explained. Some things must simply be experienced, lived, received with gratitude and wonder. The 60 facts have carried you through the night, from beginning to end, from cosmos to consciousness, from matter to meaning. And now they release you into sleep, deep, peaceful, restful sleep, where consciousness dims but does not disappear, where the mystery of being continues in different form, where you rest, held by forces seen and unseen, known and unknown, explained and inexplicable. Let go, sleep, rest. You are safe, you are known, you matter. Among all of the mysteries of the universe, you are the greatest miracle, a being capable of contemplating these mysteries, of feeling wonder, of experiencing love, of knowing that you exist and that your existence means something. Good night. Sleep deeply. The mysteries will remain tomorrow. Tonight, they simply sing you to sleep, a lullaby of unanswered questions, a symphony of wonder, a gentle darkness filled with mysteries that comfort rather than frighten. Things that science cannot explain, wrapped around you like a blanket, holding you in the great unknown, the beautiful mystery, the sacred uncertainty that makes room for faith and hope and love. Sleep. The beginning and the end have met. The circle is complete. And in the center, in the quiet darkness, you rest. One conscious being among billions. One brief life in the vastness. One flame of awareness in the dark. Precious, meaningful, held, known, loved. Sleep now. Sleep deeply. The mysteries keep watch, and morning will come. It always does. Until then, rest. You are home. You are safe. You are part of the great mystery, and that is enough. Good night.